Good evening, everybody. We're calling to order the Tuesday, December 15th meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. Rebecca, could we have a roll call, please?
Certainly. Councilmember Casissa?
Here.
Councilmember Lee?
Here.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Here.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart?
Here.
Mayor Beckman?
Here. Please join me in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Now it's open time for public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public who would like to speak on any item that's not on our agenda to do so. If you'd like to speak on anything that's not on our agenda, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Participants are going to be given 3 minutes apiece to make their comments. We're going to start with Jessica and then go to Sarah.
Hello, my name is Jessica Glennon and I am a representative of the Youth Advisory Council. I'm here to address the dangers of secondhand smoke in multi-unit housing and the negative impacts of secondhand smoke on children, and why this issue is even more central due to COVID-19. According to the American Medical Association, the chemicals arsenic, cyanide, and carbon monoxide, among up to 250 toxic chemicals released into the air when one smokes, make children prone to respiratory issues, ear infections, and severe asthma symptoms and asthma attacks. These risks are true for adults, but because children have a higher metabolism, their bodies process these toxic chemicals far more rapidly, channeling both physical and cognitive impacts. There are only a couple of reasons for why secondhand smoke causes 50,000 to 300,000 lung infections in children younger than 18 months old each year. I meant these are only a couple of reasons. This issue is all the more relevant in the midst of the coronavirus. Studies from October have shown that coronavirus can actually be transmitted through secondhand smoke due to the release of respiratory droplets into the air with each exhale of cigarette or vape smoke. To add on, a person who smokes does so without a mask, creating a high exposure risk for anybody around. While we normally take precautions to remain 6 feet away from others, secondhand smoke travels through air vents, walls, and windows and reaches much farther beyond a 6-foot vicinity to the point where essentially there is no way to escape. 40% of children admitted to the hospital for respiratory issues in America live with a smoker. While adults are equipped with the tools to make decisions for themselves, children are dependent on their parents and cannot remove themselves from dangerous situations like the presence of secondhand smoke. On behalf of the Youth Advisory Council and children in Marin, please consider enacting 100% smoke-free policies within new apartment complexes to ensure children and those with compromised immune systems are not negatively impacted by surrounding smoke. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. We're going to go to Sarah next, and let me know if I'm mispronouncing that, and then to Jack.
Hi, my name is Sarah Soriano. Thank you for your time. I am speaking tonight on behalf of a high school student named Camille Ray, who asked me to share the following statement. Hello, my name is Camille Ray, and I'm a senior at Redwood High School in Larkspur, California. After joining the Marin Youth Advisory Council this past year, I was startled by the fact that some cities county still allow smoking in multi-unit housing complexes. Although Californians have extensive protections from exposure to secondhand smoke where they work, eat, and play, many are still exposed to secondhand smoke where they live. Exposure to secondhand smoke isn't just an annoyance or discomfort. It is a serious health issue. Secondhand smoke contains more than 7,000 chemicals. Hundreds are toxic and about 70 can cause cancer. According to CDC health officials, even as few as 1 or 2 smokers can impact every corner of a 20-unit apartment building, making it easy for non-smoking bystanders to inhale these harmful chemicals. Despite attempts to mitigate secondhand smoke exposure through ventilation systems, open windows, and the separation of smokers and non-smokers, none have proved to be 100% effective. And since there is no safe level of secondhand smoke exposure, the only course of action that guarantees the security of residents would be to prohibit smoking inside or in close proximity to these buildings. Everyone living in multi-unit housing deserves to breathe smoke-free, safe air. The health of hundreds of children and adults rest in the hands of City Council members like yourselves. Please make the right choice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Syra. We're going to hear from Jack next.
Hi there, thank you. I'm Jack Moffitt. I'm a high school senior at Novato High School, and I also have some thoughts to share about the effects of secondhand smoke exposure on people living in multi-unit housing. Secondhand smoke exposure can result in the premature death and diseases in adults and children, even those who don't smoke. And when someone moves into multi-unit housing like an apartment complex, they're not choosing to be exposed to those risks. And in my opinion, it is not really fair to expose people to those risks just by living in the same apartment complex as even one or two smokers, as Syra mentioned. And the effects of these can be deadly, and especially so for children, because children's lungs are nowhere near as developed as adult lungs, and children's lungs are not at all as adept at filtering out all the toxic chemicals that come from cigarette smoke or other kinds of smoke. And often many smokers probably don't realize the effects that secondhand smoke can have on their neighbors. And that's why it's up to policymakers and city council to inform people and also to ensure that secondhand smoke is not an issue in multi-unit housing, because like I said, a lot of smokers probably don't even know that secondhand smoke can affect other people, even if they're aware of the health effects that it can have on themselves. And I believe that stronger policies surrounding secondhand smoke are absolutely necessary to protect residents in multi-unit housing. And I think that I'm just urging the city council to make the right choice and to place more restrictions on smoking in multi-unit housing and push for completely 100% smoke-free policies.
Great, thank you very much, Jack. We are going to hear from Madeley next, and then Sophie, and let me know again if I am butchering your name.
Good evening, City Council members. First and foremost, I want to start off by thanking you all for your service and commitment to making our community a great and safe place to live. My name is Madeley Reyes, and I am a senior in high school here in Marin County. I am speaking to you today to bring to your attention the issue of secondhand smoke in multi-unit housing. It is my understanding that Corte Madera is one of 5 communities in the county that still allow smoking in multi-unit housing buildings of residents. I find this extremely disappointing and quite frankly unacceptable. Being exposed to secondhand smoke from both tobacco and cannabis products result in serious health issues for all, but particularly for small children, pregnant women, and elderly. The people with respiratory problems. 65% of the air in a person's residence in multi-unit housing can be polluted with secondhand smoke or aerosol, as it makes its way in via windows, around doors, hallways, ventilations systems, and through the gaps around outlets, pipes, and fixtures. The fine particulate matter that can be breathed deeply into the lungs from first and secondhand smoke can lead to lung irritation, asthma attacks, and create respiratory infections. I have recently learned about secondhand cannabis smoke can impair blood vessels function, and as a young person who knows many people my age and older whom smoke or vape tobacco and cannabis products, I think it is important that we have strong policies in place that prohibit smoking in or near multi-unit housing buildings, because I believe it will reduce the harmful impacts that innocent people, those who do not smoke, have to endure as a result of secondhand smoke, because there are not enough strong policies in place to protect them from it. I am glad that most Marin County communities have adopted 100% smoke-free policy in multi-unit housing buildings of residents that includes all types of smoke, such as from cigarettes and vapes. But I am asking you to seriously consider becoming one of them. Everyone who lives in multi-unit housing deserves to breathe smoke-free and fresh air without chemicals in it. The fair health of hundreds and maybe thousands of people in this community rests in the hands of the city council members. One of the best ways to protect it from this threat is for the buildings to be completely smoke-free. Please make the right choice for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maidali. We're going to hear from Sophie next.
Good evening. My name is Sophie Taubman. I'm a senior at High School 1327 in San Anselmo, and I'm so appreciative for you all doing your work and for hearing me out tonight. So for the past 2 years, I've been volunteering as a member of the Youth Advisory Council, a youth organization that aims to reduce substance use within Marin County and advocate for the protection of all people countywide from the adverse effects that many substances have on the public. Recently, I've specifically been studying the effects of secondhand smoke and how it poses a physical threat to all people who are within a building where any amount of this kind of smoke is present. This smoke can travel through air vents, windows, under doorways, and even cracks in the walls, ceilings, or floors in apartment complexes, guaranteeing that other tenants will inhale a dangerous amount of secondhand smoke. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, secondhand smoke can cause premature death and devastating illnesses in both children and adults, as well as increase the risk of developing asthma and heart disease. Unfortunately, in 5 out of the 12 Marin communities, Corte Madera is among one of the cities that all multi-unit housing is not 100% smoke-free. The only solution to this problem is for city council members such as yourselves and supervisors to put the necessary restrictions in place to protect our community members. To put it simply, I strongly believe that breathing clean air is not a privilege, it is a right. So please do your part to enforce such a basic yet crucial concept, and do not stand by as our fellow Marin County residents are being harmed involuntarily. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Sophie. We don't have any other hands up from attendees on the line right now. Rebecca, did we get any emailed comments from members of the public for open time?
Yes, we did receive 2 emailed public comment letters. I'm checking to see if anyone is on the Zoom at the moment.
Okay, great. And in the meantime, I'm going to invite our town manager to just comment really briefly on the comments that we just heard on, I think, a very important issue that is, near and dear to all of our hearts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So to anyone on this call that spoke in open time regarding this issue, as a town manager, I would be very interested in, listing us as one of 5 agencies if there was a recent passage of resolutions at the county level, because as staff, I am not aware of any, and I focus and work closely with all of our member agencies in this county as well as the county of Marin. And so we have made a number of amendments to our ordinance over the past few years regarding this issue. We currently have restrictions and bans at multi-housing units, rental units. There are designated locations where someone can smoke, but there are a number of restrictions. And so the language here being used tonight on the 100% ban, I would be interested on any recent amendments at the county level. And if there are any, I would appreciate that being shared with me, and I'm happy to follow up with the county of Marin as well as we've followed the county on all amendments, again, over the past few years. So this is news to me, and I'm happy to follow up with the county. And again, if anybody else on this call has any information that they can forward to me, that would be helpful. But we do have restrictions. We have been graded as a town compared to all of our cohorts in the state regarding our smoking ordinances. And my understanding was that we were in line with the other jurisdictions within this county. So this is news to me, and I'm happy to follow up after this meeting.
Thank you very much, Todd. Rebecca, how are we looking?
Okay, we have not received any additional emailed public comments, but we received some over the weekend. Two of the same letter, actually. So I'll just read it once and then list the names of the 2 people that sent the letter, and just let council and the public know that these and other emailed public comments we've received this evening have been linked on the town's agenda and are also available on the town's website.
Great.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could just add one other thing, I'm sorry. In the municipal code that I'm related to, so anybody on this call that can relate to it, it's chapter 6.14 of our municipal code. So please go to that, review it. And again, any information, I'm happy to work with the callers on this this meeting moving forward.
Thanks.
Okay. The following email was, let me start the timer, sent from Omar Carrera, titled, "We need bold, innovative actions for pandemic survival and recovery now. I urge you to immediately enact a rent freeze and put a stop to evictions during the pandemic. It is imperative that we act with courage and conviction in bold and proactive policy implementation. You know the devastating impacts that the pandemic and the shelter-in-place policies have had on low-income families, essential workers, and residential and commercial landowners in our community and across the county. We need emergency measures at the local level to protect our families and businesses. Recovery is inextricably linked across communities and sectors. Only together can we rise to the challenge and achieve stability and recovery. Residents rely on businesses for employment and on landowners for housing. Businesses rely on residents as employees and customers, and landowners rely on residents and businesses as tenants. There is no emergency greater now. We must keep people housed for us all to be healthy. In Marin County, over 10,000 households are at imminent risk of eviction after January 31st, when the moratorium ends. This will devastate families and will bring a major spike in COVID cases. This is a time for bold, extraordinary, and proactive policies that protect our shared well-being. We need bold and innovative policies. According to economists and experts in public health and housing, the most effective and urgent policies for recovery and stability are to implement a rent freeze and extend eviction protections. I urge you to look for a way to implement an immediate rent freeze and enact greater eviction protections across the county. Join us in this campaign for a rapid, safe, and viable recovery. Regards, Omar Carrera." And the same email was also sent from Christina Parisi.
Great. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you to everybody who's commented to us both via email and here in person tonight. I know it takes courage. It's not easy to do that. So we appreciate you coming and speaking on these important issues. We don't have any other hands up right now, so we're going to close open time, and that will bring us to item 3 on our agenda, which is presentations. We have one presentation from the Parks and Rec Department.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ashley Ha. I'm your Parks and Recreation Director, and I'm going to share our annual program report with you today. So give me a minute while I share my screen. All right. So our 2020 department goals and priorities were broken into the following areas: communication, employee engagement and training, programs and services, planning, new program generation, reviewing policies, procedures, forms, and collateral. Communication, which focused on our social media campaign, which began in March 2020. And as a reminder to the council and any of our viewers, I started day 2 of COVID, so March 17th. So anything before day 2 was a little bit of a blur to me and to everybody else on our team. So just bear in mind with that part. Okay, so our goal was to make our posts consistent, thorough, and polished, improve following presence on Facebook, Instagram, and Nextdoor. We increased our Facebook likes by 121 and our followers increased by 221. We created a new Instagram account in March with 172 posts currently and 539 followers. Marketing, we focused on our digital activity guides rather than print media, school newsletters, towns newsletters, and target emails to our clients through our registration software. And we focused on our website, making additions and improvements to improve user experience, which also meant decreasing a lot of our content that was no longer relevant. Relationships. Continue to strengthen relationships with Larkspur Corte Madera School District, Corte Madera Library, community groups, and parks and recreation agencies throughout Marin County as resources. Collaborations and involvement in regular meetings through Marin Recovers, Marin VOAD, Neighborhood Neighbor to Neighbor, senior groups, local parks and recreation groups, and the California Parks and Recreation Society, which really helped us stay afront of all of the changing guidelines through the state and the county, as well as trends and anything we could do to support our community through this process. Community engagement. Communication and support with essentials, developing signage and distributing community messages related to the closures, restrictions, and openings, and sharing resources and support for mental health and self-care. And those are just some of the examples. And here are some of our images, because we're Parks and Rec, so we like fun images. So on the top left, you can see that that's one of our digital activity guides. And adjacent, that's one of our Facebook posts to get engagement, get people into our parks, taking pictures. And then one of our many playgrounds are closed, playgrounds are open, playgrounds are closed, playgrounds are open. They're currently open. We supported our voters and had our ballot box out front and created a video of walking people to the ballot box and making sure that everyone felt secure and safe during the process. We created a virtual recreation and resource point page on our website, as well as a social media activities, events, and fun. We also had a campaign image in the bottom left-hand corner, which was all of our staff at the time. Unfortunately, we don't have all of the same staff with us at the end or currently, but just a connection out to our community that we're always just a phone call away. And we did a couple of different campaigns like this. And then we've got our smiles are more contagious than COVID-19 to kind of brighten the day of some of our seniors. We started with about 400 calls every week, and it decreased to about 70. And then the last 2 weeks, we're calling about 300 more just to kind of say happy holidays from our department. But we delivered those in collaboration with Nothing Bundt Cakes to those seniors that we had had calls with that were just kind of feeling that needed an extra pick-me-up. So a little extra attention from the Parks and Recreation team. And then we had a campaign to engage people to help name our new dog park that we opened on June 29th. And we've got the Larkspur Corte Madera School District logo there. We have weekly meetings because we've been running programs on campus at Neil Cummins. We had the reminder for Dogs on Leash as we modified the ordinance and created a maximum length of leash, as well as eliminating the use of the low canal on the east side of Town Park. And just a sample of some of the signage that we have out in the park and around the community with wearing your mask and having a bilingual image there. Employee engagement and training. We hosted a recreation intern from Cal Poly. So from September to December, Perry was officially our intern, and she is staying on with us to support customer service and projects as needed. Organization of electronic file storage. Christina on our team is taking care of our P drive, creating a planned file tree, purging unneeded files, and really going through everything and making sure that we're current and we're relevant, and we're using this time to really maximize our efficiency. Weekly Zoom staff meetings and one-on-one virtual meetings as requested or needed. All of my staff have taken time with working from home and seeing the challenge of what that is to the team and making sure that you're staying connected. So really making that option. And I think the Zoom has been really helpful. Employee development team is encouraged to seek out education and training opportunities and share resources and inspirational ideas and strategies with our rest of our team. I've really pushed everybody to kind of reach out to our colleagues and our neighboring agencies through our networking calls and Zooms, because I think that that's something that maybe the team has lacked in the past, really kind of a connection. So really getting everybody out there, because we have a lot of strengths and we have a lot of strengths around us. So it's really great to create that collaboration opportunity. Professional engagement. Our team is encouraged to engage with professionals through California Parks and Recreation Society events, meetings, and calls. Collaboration. Teams encouraged to collaborate with our colleagues from neighboring agencies. We've had the biweekly Marin Recreation Group. We've had a senior group. We've had the Marin County Parks and Recreation managers. Just kind of keep us all on the same page as the guidelines have continued to change. So therefore, when we're opening or closing facilities or making restrictions, we're all in line. It keeps all of our jurisdictions on the same page. And it's really a lot easier when we go to communicating and educating our communities. Leadership. Our team is encouraged to consider leading education sessions at future CPRS trainings. We have a lot of strengths on our team. So we have Erin, who has extensive experience with after-school programs and working with adults with developmental disabilities. I encourage her to lead a session on that, or at least create a panel situation. And Christina is definitely our researcher. So like when she's organizing the file tree for storage, I think a lot of people have different ways of storing things. And when you're using shared drives, we have our IT teammates that are asking us to make sure that we're minimizing our storage time. So she's doing pioneering efforts and research all these different ways to rename your files and kind of get people organized. We also have an organizational chart. And so we're developed in the interim with organizational chart with roles and responsibilities. And this is an evolving document that's a team effort. Because as our responsibilities have shifted during the pandemic, we've kind of scaled back what our normal expectations are, and we've all taken on different things. And here are some of our images. We've got Perry's graduation photo from Cal Poly. In the middle is the CPRS Region 1 conference that 5 of our team members attended virtually. And I think it was really great. It was the first virtual training conference that California Parks and Recreation Society has done. And all of our staff were able to pick from a couple different sessions at one time. And then they were able to go back and watch the recorded version of the sessions they didn't attend. And everybody got something out of every session. And they really got that spirit back and that motivation. So it was really great. And then on the right-hand side is our simulated version of going to Disneyland. So Perry is also keeping our employee morale up, and she's leading a step challenge and making us all be accountable for the amount of steps that we have. So we did a fun little thing and inserted ourselves into Disneyland. We're halfway through Utah now. We went down to Mexico and we're coming back to Utah, and we've got a special destination that we've got one more week. All right, programs and services. We have classes. Our goals are to focus on quality and variety, and we've used a variety of platforms between virtual and in person. Programming, we've got Camp 2020 during the summer, Corte Madera Day Camp with the school year support, and then we're planning a future preschool and after school program. Events, we've executed small events that can be fun, safe, and well produced. And luckily we've done those in collaboration with the library, including our story times, which our current story time offered, which is supposed to be a fireside story time, kind of a winter theme. We're gonna be going recorded, unfortunately. We're gonna be doing it on the patio. Activities, social media contests that are all well done, image content and yield good participation. Volunteer recognition. The Parks and Recreation Commission awarded 3 winners of the Volunteer of the Year award this year. And it was modified slightly so that the winners were not selected this summer, and normally they would ride on the 4th of July parade, which was canceled. So we delayed it and had them due in September. And we recognized everybody, the 3 winners, over 3 different town newsletter segments, as well as created a web page that's devoted to the program and recognizing the details of the winners, and a half-page advertisement that was printed in the Marin IJ on Friday, December 4th. And then facility rentals and outdoor use agreements. We created park and field rentals for 12 businesses to operate outdoors in the park space. Most of those are fitness classes or exercise. And we developed a package of requirements needed to meet pandemic guidelines and liability. We identified new rental space for local businesses. For example, the basketball court, tennis wall, patio, fields, and picnic areas. And then we rented Neil Cummins Gym to Marin Volleyball. And thanks to Brian Hernandez on our team, he's organized all of that with our groups. And we've issued approved program signs to everybody that has approval so that it could be easily identified by CMPA, anybody else that's in the park area. And it's flashing, there we go. All right. So we've got Corte Madera FC, which is our soccer program. They weren't sure at some point whether they were going to be able to operate. And not only did they operate, but they exceeded and they excelled without any competition. All of their programming was limited to drills and conditioning. And it was really great to have the opportunity for the kids to be outside in an organized activity within their stable cohorts. And then next to that is our adult capoeira program. And that's one of our park rentals with the approved program sign next to it. The Town of Corte Madera 2020 Volunteer of the Year Award. And then May the 4th be with you, which is an example of some of our social media. Camp 2020 is represented. And then next to that is one of our virtual adult classes. That is our Dr. Inkwell's. So that's our bartending class. And I did take one of those. It's quite entertaining. He's got facts and history lessons that go with everything. So he always has alcoholic and non-alcoholic versions as well. The Mother's Day Trivia Contest was a Facebook post also and challenge that we did with the Chamber of Commerce. So thank you, Julie. Next to that is one of our kids that have participated in our contract gymnastics class with the Flying Dutchman. We've got an image of the fireside story time that has gone in person to virtual. And then the North Pole news and the letters to Santa. And then we have our skate park and our skateboard lessons. Planning, facility improvements. We've taken advantage of the downtime for repairs and improvements. Example, repairing stage doors beneath the stage, or storage doors, replacing window screens, improving sound system for function and ADA accessibility. We had the building rekeyed, we relocated the department offices and installed cubicles, for examples. We also focused on emergency planning, which was part of Perry's internship requirements. She made room layouts and she drafted different areas where PSP outlets are. She also organized layouts based on percentages of occupancy, because that was part of the Marin Recovers guidelines and the state guidelines for being able to operate indoors. We're developing a supply list for PSPS events, and she procured all of those supplies just in case we had an event this October. We're drafting communication, and she confirmed connections with the packaged food, so prepackaged food from some of our grocery stores, just as in the previous year. We have a master plan process started. It's initiated by the Parks and Recreation Commission subcommittee, and they have conceptual ideas for community center and development. And they're beginning to share that this month with staff to make sure that we're on the right track. And then we're going to be doing community needs assessment survey and engagement beginning in as early as January, but early next year. Preparation for Zooming classes, programs, and services as usual has begun. We've installed plexiglass at the reception area, drafted functional plans for the dance studio, utilized data for class requests from school needs assessment survey, improved facility rental collateral, improved implementing service agreements, and updated policies and procedures. And part of that is still a work in progress. My finger's a little too fast on that. All right, our planning highlights. We opened a dog park. So there's, we have Councilmember Casisas, Vice Chair of the Recreation Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, Janowski, and we have Commissioner Ravazio. We opened the Skunk Hollow Mini Park with new play equipment. That's an image of the community center and all the repaired storage doors below the stage. We have our new office space and cubicles, which is more safe during the situation. We have a sample layout of a PSPS storage or PSPS setup with outlets marked and extension cords that are purchased. And then we have our plexiglass installed at the front counter. So when we're able to open, we are ready to rock and roll. All right, new program generation. We've modified camps a few times to adhere to the evolving county and state guidelines. Camp 2020 was in the summer, and then the Corte Madera Day Camp is our current school year program, which is assisting families and students during the transition period of going back to school and with distant learning. We proclaimed July as Parks Make Life Better Month through the council, through a presentation and a proclamation, and we shared a calendar of pandemic approved activities to get people active in the month of July. We have digital activity guides, which allow us the flexibility to program with changing guidelines and reduce expensive printing versions, which included the designer, print, and mailing fees. We have a future preschool and childcare program in development. We've executed a contract with an industry expert to build the program, and with a hopefully estimated start of next school year with 2021 and 22, pending the resolution of the pandemic. Otherwise, our current program will continue to operate as is to support distant learning. We applied for 2 sport court grants through the National Fitness Campaign that will be included in the master plan community engagement. And then programming for adults with developmental disabilities. Programs were previously hosted by Larkspur Recreation, and we're currently supporting the monthly dances via Zoom. And up here, we've got Perry and Schnott from camp, our Corte Madera Day Camp. We have our proclamation of July's Parks Make Life Better Month. We have our friends with that participate in our programs for developmentally disabled adults. We have our kids in our camps, a digital activity guide cover, and the National Fitness Campaign logo. And finally, reviewing policies, procedures, forms, and collateral. Our policies and procedures, we're looking at them to evaluate and improve efficiencies while working to minimize potential liability and incorporating our consultant feedback. That includes the animal ordinance, picnic area rentals, park and field rentals, our memorial program for bench tree and plaques, streamlining that process to make that easier. scholarship program, creating a transparent program for donors and recipients and incorporate consultant feedback, which is in progress. And then our park sign template, which was presented the template for park signs that included the park name and operational hours. And that's been presented to the Parks and Recreation Commission and the Planning Commission, and both have approved and recommended for council discussion in January. So I'll be back. All right, 2021 department goals and priorities. This is the fast part. 3 areas: communication, programs and services, and planning. Social media, continue to make professional engaging posts via Facebook, Instagram, and Nextdoor. Introduction of department YouTube channel in January 2021. Erin is putting the final touches on that, and she has learned it from the ground up. Digital news, can you continue to provide digital content for the town, school newsletter, and always provide a digital option for an activity guide, even once able to resume printing. Website, we have continued to make improvements to the Parks and Rec pages with the layout and function, and continue to update the content to improve user experience. And RecPro, which is our registration software, we have the ability to customize the blank screens and anything else that improves the customer experience, and Brian is working on that. Relationships, we plan to continue to strengthen the relationships established with the school district, community groups, Corte Madera Library, and Larkspur Recreation. Employee engagement and training, implement their new file storage tree for electronic employees' files and shared documents, and schedule an annual review and audit to streamline our process. Continue to host weekly staff meetings via Zoom until we can meet in person. Encourage our team to seek out education and training opportunities and take leadership roles. And encourage the team to engage with professionals through California Parks and Recreation Society events, meetings, and calls. And continue to develop the department organizational chart with evolving roles and responsibilities. And that's our team effort. Programs and services, our classes continue to focus on quality and variety using different platforms. Programs, our goal is priority on safety, quality, and efficiency. That includes Corte Madera Day Camp, Summer Camp, Corte Madera FC, which is our soccer, adult softball when we're able to resume with restrictions, adults with developmental disability programs, and then our annual tennis key sales, which are available to purchase now. Events, continue to offer small events that can be well produced and safe, and then bring back the community to our facilities and parks as soon as possible. Activities, continue to provide social media contests that are well done and engaging. Volunteer of the Year program. We hope to revamp the program and combine it with the Town Citizens of the Year Award. And then art exhibitions are one of my new passions here, to introduce the art exhibitions and receptions once guidelines permit. And we do have a first virtual exhibition with the California Watercolor Association. And then if restrictions permit, we will have limited pieces, limited to 50, to be displayed in the community center. And then a director's showcase, which it'll be an invitational exhibition and reception when guidelines permit. Planning, continue our emergency planning. And that means continue the functionality of layouts, make sure that all of our supplies are in stock and easily accessible, create and monitor expiration dates, draft communications to residents and staff, make sure that staff are trained on where the layouts, supplies, and communication plans are located so that anyone can support opening the facility. And then food connections, establish those relationships and requests annually. Master plan, continue process with the subcommittee of the Parks and Recreation Commission, conceptual ideas for a community center and development, community engagement and needs assessment survey to be administered early 2021. Facilities, continue to take advantage of the downtime for repairs and improvements. That includes updating our forms and marketing collateral for rentals, and providing improved collateral for Chamber of Commerce, Marin Visitors Bureau, and rental venue websites such as the Knot, Wedding Wire, and Yelp. Facility improvements, replace community center rain gutters, organize barn and boat storage shed, organize the green room for staff conference room and breakout room, and Town Park Plaza, improvements for year-round community use. Discussions in progress between the Parks and Recreation Commission, Corte Madera Foundation, and the town. Agreements, we have a few outstanding agreements. Develop new agreement to operate preschool and after-school program in the former portables used by Twin Cities Childcare, Children's Center at Neil Cummins, Twin Cities Little League, a use agreement for fields, Corte Madera FC, terms for agreement for program lead and trainers, propose an agreement with the City of Larkspur to offer more combined park and recreation services. And I'm going to skip through the policies and procedures because you're going to have a very long report that's all written out for you to review. My main thing is that I do have staff that are on the call or on the line. I wanted to thank you to our Parks and Recreation team. You've all demonstrated versatility, resourcefulness, and positivity in the wake of constantly changing guidelines and requests. You continue to impress and inspire me. And that's Brian, Aaron, Christina, Perry, Shanat, Alex, and then who has been with us off and on during the process, Debbie, Nancy, and Jess. Everyone has equally been a part of our team. Any questions?
Yeah,
Ashley, did you want to bring them over to say hi?
Sure,
yeah.
I can do that. Let me figure out how.
Members of the council, while she's doing that, I
can take care of that.
Rebecca, if you're able to bring over Louise Brown as well from the Parks and Rec Commission. I just want to say while they're doing that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that Ashley, like she mentioned at the start of this, came over under duress. It was the second day of the original order in March of this stay-at-home order. That it was her second day of that order was her first day here. And so it's remarkable what they've accomplished. We're so proud of them. And the energy level between our Parks and Rec staff under Ashley's guidance and the Parks and Rec Commission, I've never seen it like this before. It's exciting. And that's why I want to bring Luis over as well after we meet our staff to share one project that we're working on. But I'm just so proud of all of you. You're the shining star beacon through all of this darkness in 2020. And I just, you have just persevered. You've shown up every day. I appreciate you all so, so much. Thank you for all that you all do. So thank you. Ashley?
Thank you. I think I've made everyone a panelist, so you should be able to see them. We've got Brian, will you wave? Christina, will you wave? Perry, will you wave? Aaron, will you show us your video and wave? She's hiding. But I think that's everyone right now. And I'll share the video and everything with everyone else that's not able to be here tonight. There's Aaron.
Wow, thank you guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Any questions of the council?
Did you want to bring over Louise now, or?
I did, if I could, and then maybe then turn it over to the council for any questions. But I want to share some of that energy between the commission and Ashley and staff of just really excitement of problem solving and our vision moving forward. And one of them that we want to talk about is the Town Park Plaza. It's a recent discussion, it's an evolving kind of discussion as, from our last council meeting to right now, a lot of things have changed with the stay-at-home order and how do we help businesses? How do we help the community? And so as we really infuse money into the economy with gift cards to help businesses and residents, potentially in doing it safely, to have a place for people to congregate safely and distanced within the requirements, the Town Park Plaza really started the discussion, and it's a potential $80,000 to $100,000 project. It's something we have in our budget. We're having discussions through Luis with the Corte Madera Community Foundation as well to partner with us to really try to do something to add an awning, a retractable awning to the Town Park Plaza where we currently have our structure there, and improve it with furniture and some really nice amenities that I think our community would really appreciate. And it was born from our Parks and Rec Commission and Luis's vision and the work of Ashley and her team. So it's not for me to say. I wanted Luis to jump on and really tell that story briefly for the council because she's amazing and I'm really excited about this. I hope the council is too. I'll come back to you at the next meeting to really continue this conversation, but our intent as staff, a commission, and hopefully with the Corte Madera Community Foundation is to start this process now through the holiday break to really jump on this and get this started. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Louise if she's on this call.
Great, I am. And thank you for that introduction. And just before I start, I would echo, Todd, what you said about Ashley and her team. They've just done such a tremendous job. And I think part of the reason the commission is so excited and fired up and seizing some of these opportunities is because we see that same energy coming from the Parks and Rec department, and their desire to do things differently, do more is contagious. So we've taken that on, and the project that I want to briefly talk about is the completion of the development of Town Park Plaza, which is really something that has incredible structural bones, and we see as an opportunity to create a really welcoming, dynamic gathering space for our community. It couldn't be more important now, given the COVID restrictions and the need to have outdoor spaces, but it is relevant for this community year round. We have beautiful weather, whether it's long summer days or chilly winter evenings. People want to congregate outside, and to give people a place where they can go to gather, chat, have a meal, have a drink, meet before school or after a romp in the dog park. There are so many opportunities to make Town Park Plaza more welcoming, more inviting, more comfortable. And so we have been working on a plan as a subcommittee within the Park and Rec Commission. I want to recognize the commissioners I've been working with, Commissioner Phipps and Commissioner Ravazio, to really reimagine the Town Park Plaza and to see the structural bones that exist there, and to try to think about it as a community. I'm going to call it like an outdoor great room, a place where you can go to eat, to relax, to read, to plug in or unplug, but we have to have places where people can get comfortable and do the things that they want to do there. And right now, you know, to use a technical term, it's a little janky. We've got a bunch of, you know, random bits of furniture and seating areas, and we see an opportunity to really make it much more aesthetically appealing, which we think will make it in general much more welcoming, and we can make it a lot more comfortable. So there are two main efforts with this furnishing plan that I'll call it. One is weatherizing, and Todd mentioned this briefly. The trellis is a great structure, but when the sun is beating down during the summer, or we have winds blowing up and over from the mountains, it's not as lovely to be there. So we're going to create a retractable awning that will go underneath the trellis, enable the vines that are growing up and over the trellis to continue to thrive, but give us an opportunity to have shade and wind protection. So in addition to that awning that will go under the trellis, we're going to do some roller shades that can be lowered on the side panels of the trellis on the north and the west side, where you get the most sun and wind exposure. If you think, you've probably seen these in the past, they're kind of a mesh that allows you to see through them so they don't block off the views, but they do give you a lot of protection from the elements. So that's one of the main things that we're doing. The other thing is we want to install some really durable, large scale umbrellas. Normal umbrellas that you see, and there are a couple on the plaza right now, get turned inside out with the winds that we have. But there are some nautical grade umbrellas that will be much more durable and will last for many, many seasons for us. And so we want to do those, and they have an 8 to 10 foot square surface area, so they'll really cast a lot of shade in the summertime. So that's weatherizing. In addition, we also want to create really comfortable, welcoming gathering places that can be for smaller, more intimate groups, or larger events, or just if you come down to the community, to the Town Park Plaza and want to see who's there, there will be something going on. So two elements of that really. The first is to create dining type seating, tables and chairs underneath the trellis. So we'll have that lovely retractable awning. We can, you know, put patios, lights under there, or heat lamps to make it warm and cozy during the evenings, but to have tables where people can eat a meal if they want to, or just gather. In the last week, I've seen kids getting together with their tutors after school there. Parents are there. People are going there after they walk their dogs at the dog park. People are gathering there before morning bike rides. There's a lot of opportunity where people just want to sit down, have a cup of coffee, or just sit down and do some work. So that kind of seating underneath the trellis, so I think we'll get a lot of use. The other seating area will be on the south side of the plaza. It's where Cafe Verde currently has small cafe tables and chairs. And we really want to take advantage of something that was done when the infrastructure of Town Park Plaza was put in, there is plumbing there to put in a fire pit. And that would be an amazing asset to Town Park Plaza, to be able to put in a really nice warm element like that, surround it with comfortable seating, and again, make it something that is magnetic for the community. And as you drive by, you would start to see that there's a lot happening at Town Park Plaza that you would want to be a part of. As Todd mentioned, we are, or I think Ashley mentioned, actually, we are working closely with the Community Foundation, and we want to initiate a fundraising effort to try to get the community to participate in getting this upgrade done. We have some ideas about how we might be able to recognize donors with a tile of some sort with their name on it, or some other way to recognize their contribution. But we think that this is really necessary, and it is really about just finishing something that was started when the infrastructure was put in, when the trellis was originally built. And we think it's going to be an asset to Corte Madera for many, many years to come.
Great. Thank you so much, Louise and Ashley and the whole team. I'm going to open this up to the council for questions, then we'll take public comment, and then we'll bring it back to the council for any last comments. Fred?
Oh, I didn't have a question. I was going to make a comment, so I can hold off.
Okay. Do we have any questions for staff? And if not, we'll take public comment. David? You're muted.
There we go. Louise, do you have an estimated total budget for those wonderful sounding improvements?
Yeah, right now our estimated budget is somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000. We've been working with Restoration Hardware. We think this is a really nice opportunity to feature their quality and durability and a local homegrown business, and they're offering us up to about a 40% discount. So it's really significant discount on their furnishings. We have bids in for the awning from a couple of different vendors, likewise for the fire table, and we're looking at some other options there. So I think, I would be more comfortable saying about 100,000 once you factor in things like planters and planting, which we want to also do. There's some issues that we have to accommodate with the, in order for alcohol to be served there by Cafe Verde, to create some barriers. And we want to do that with green planting to, again, kind of create a nice ambiance to the area. So about $100,000.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Yeah, Charles?
When those concrete picnic tables are relocated, if we do new furniture there, have you already thought of areas where those would be relocated?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I didn't mean to not address that. So those concrete picnic tables do have plaques on them, and they are part of what was originally a fundraising effort that was done for the first phase. But there are a lot of places within the park that we think that those could really be an asset. We would like to move a couple of them over to the dog park area, several of them over to the skate park, and maybe even put one or two of them over in the area just to the north side of Town Park Plaza, where it's currently tan bark or mulch, where the kids climb trees. There are definitely places that those can be moved and used to great effect.
Okay, so on part of that was, I saw that you were changing the forms for rentals, and we've installed those really nice covers inside the playground area that's fenced, and I've always wanted to see seating installed under there. So it might be nice to put a couple of those and be able to rent that out for birthdays for the younger children, so that they can be in a protected area. Just something to consider. Also, when you think of seating around the skate park, I think almost like a tiered kind of benching, so that parents can sit outside and watch their kids, and less people feel like they have to get inside, would be something nice to consider during the planning. So the other one is you applied for 2 grants for courts, but I was wondering if those 2 courts are identified or thought about, and what that application really, a little bit more detail on that. If not, and it's just, grants right now, that's fine too, but I was just curious.
Locations are still flexible, but the 2 of the locations that I proposed were one in Town Park and then one on the east side. So whether it be potentially an area that's near the village, or somewhere else, maybe over near San Clemente Cove area.
Okay. But then, like the function of like when you say courts, it could be any kind of basketball multi-use court or.
They're a parkour course. Their premier example is the one that's in the marina in San Francisco.
Parkour, awesome. Okay, cool. Thanks for that. I'm glad I asked. Right.
Yes, they host app challenges, classes, and then just general drop-in use.
Free.
Fantastic. Any other questions for staff? If not, we're going to go ahead and open this up to public comment. Any members of the public who are on the line and would like to ask questions or make comments on this fantastic presentation we just received, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Rebecca, did we receive any emailed public comments on this presentation?
No emailed public comments.
Great, and I am not seeing any hands up on Zoom. Looks like nobody wants to comment on this, so we'll close public comment and bring it back to the council. This was just an informational presentation, so we'll just make some quick comments, share some thoughts. I just want to say, Ashley and her team, wow, I don't even know where to start. I think to say that you've kind of, revamped our entire department would be a huge understatement. I feel like, you've kind of changed my personal perception of what a Parks and Rec department can be, you and your team and our fantastic commission. This is incredible. So I just want to thank you, thank your staff, thank our Parks and Rec Commission, thank Fred for the great work that he has done on our Parks and Rec Commission. I'm just blown out of the water by this. Who else would like to comment? Fred?
Yeah, again, same along Eli's line, just totally impressed, Ashley. And also Brian, Christina, Perry, and Aaron, great job. I don't know why I'm emotional, sorry. Give me a minute.
Bob?
Great presentation. Thank you. Best I've seen in all my years on the council. Keep it up. You guys are doing great. Just keep going forward as fast as you can. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll add, I think being on Park and Rec for 6 or 7 years, it's a complete transformation. So just amazing job. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Fred. And I think, that really speaks to the work that you have put into the Parks and Rec also through your dedication to the commission. You've seen, I feel like, some of the best and some of the worst. I don't want to be dramatic, but like the transformation that we've seen is just night and day. And I think that's really reflected in your comments. So thank you again, Fred. David?
I just want to pile on some of those remarks, but Ashley and staff, I've got to say that through this year, it takes an extraordinary amount of energy and heart and imagination to continue your affirmative attitude and your interactions in such an upbeat way. I congratulate you for doing that.
Any other comments for our fantastic Parks and Rec crew? Yeah, Charles.
Great job to the whole crew. And especially I want to thank Ashley for her first year and what she's been able to do. And actually her personal commitment and going above and beyond on certain issues that are affecting us during the pandemic that I think is incredibly vital and not usually Park and Rec, but incredibly valuable to the community and a great new asset as far as an approach to helping the community during this time. I'd like to thank her personally for that. So.
Amen to that. Well, hats off to you guys. Thank you so much. That was an incredible presentation. Honestly, uplifting. That was amazing. So thank you so much. I wish you guys, all the staff, a great rest of your evening. Thanks for taking the time to join us. It was a pleasure to see your guys' faces. If there's no other comments on this, we can go ahead and move on to our consent calendar. That's going to be item 4 for us. The consent calendar are items that are routine or have been previously discussed and do not need to be discussed again. Any member of the public or the council can pull an item from the consent calendar for further discussion. Would any members of the council or staff like to pull an item from our consent calendar? Seeing none, we'll turn it over to the public. If any member of the public would like to pull an item from the consent calendar for comment or discussion, or comment on the consent calendar as a whole, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom. We'll give folks a minute here to raise their hands if they want to. And seeing none, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the council for a motion on the consent calendar.
I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Fred.
I'll go ahead and make the motion. We approve consent items through A through 4G.
Second.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bob.
Okay. Councilmember Casissa.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes, thank you. There are no public hearings, which brings us to item 6. These are our business items. First business item 6A is discussion and possible adoption of resolution number 45, 2020, approving the 2020 Climate Action Plan. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to ask Phil Boyle, our senior planner, to provide a quick update for council. Phil?
Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Good evening, Mayor Beckman, members of the council. I'm Phil Boyle. I'm your senior planner here with the town. And I just wanted to give a brief overview and a big thank you regarding our new updated 2020 Climate Action Plan. As the staff report shows, our first initial Climate Action Plan was approved back in, officially approved back in 2018. And that was with the help of the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership, and particularly Christina Work, who is a consultant that's worked for us for many, many years. And she did a fabulous job updating our Climate Action Plan, which is a very important document, as I'm sure you all are aware, in doing our part to reduce greenhouse gases within the town of Corte Madera. So one of the main aspects of the plan is to constantly update it and keep it as a fresh and active document, as climate change obviously is a constantly changing field. So one of the proposal was, and one of the directions from the original plan was to update the plan every 5 years. So here we are 5 years already at 2020, and we once again tapped Christina Work to help us update this plan. And a unique part of this year's update is we had the Climate Action Committee, which is a newly formed committee headed up by Mayor Beckman and Vice Mayor Kuhnhart. And we had the opportunity of using those volunteer folks to take a look at the plan near its final review and just give it a quick glance over and make sure we dotted all of our I's and crossed our T's. I want to particularly thank Vice Mayor Kuhnhart and also member of the Climate Action Committee, Martin Wall, to helping me through some of the edits and getting it finally tuned. So I think this is an excellent document. We're moving further and further every time with a better, more vibrant and more aggressive climate action plan. And I hope that the council will take a look at this, or has taken a close look at the plan, and will approve the attached resolution recommending adoption of the plan. And I included with the plan also, I've included the resolution with the staff report, as well as the greenhouse gas inventory that Mr. Work did for us as well. So that really concludes my brief report, and I certainly can answer any questions that you have regarding the staff report and the plan.
Great, thank you so much, Phil. Do we have any questions for staff on the Climate Action Plan? If not, we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. Any members of the public who would like to comment on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Our first comment is going to come from Maureen. Whenever you're ready, Maureen. You know, we are not able to hear you. I'm not sure if there might be a microphone issue. I see you are on mute now.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the public, I also just want to be clear that there are two items, and I think there are some members of the public, and Maureen may be one of them, that we have the Climate Action Plan and the Climate Adaptation Plan item. And I think there's some discussion regarding PG&E lines, and that would be appropriate under the next item, not this one. And so I just want to be clear to the members of the public that wish to speak on the PG&E undergrounding.
Great clarification. Thank you, Todd. So yeah, we did receive a good amount of public comment regarding potential undergrounding of power lines in the more fire-prone areas of Corte Madera. And so that discussion is going to be germane to our next agenda item, which is the Climate Adaptation Plan. So with that said, we no longer have any hands up for public comment on this item. Rebecca, did we get any emailed public comments for the Climate Action Plan?
I'm just double checking to make sure that all of the ones that I had earmarked are for the next item, and
Perfect.
the town manager is correct, they're for the next item.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, great. Then we will close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council for discussion and a possible motion. Anybody have any comments on this climate action plan? I just want to say real quick, thank you to Phil and Todd and the staff for the kind of 11th hour update that you guys did this morning. Just made sure that we got an important section in there regarding equity, which I think is increasingly on everybody's mind this year. It's very important. And I think, I appreciate that we were able to get that language in there this year. And I think that's really going to tee us up to be able to weave equity into throughout the whole plan in a more thoughtful and comprehensive manner as we continue our 3-year revision cycle. So thank you guys for that. Are there any other comments on this? And if not, we'll take a motion. David?
I just wanted to say that, point out, if it's not obvious to those who are reading this, that this year's action plan really is qualitatively different from the first draft in 2016. It's much more oriented to action. And I think this is largely because of the action committee that we have, who is haranguing us to make things real. I also wanted to point out that the sort of the nitty-gritty actions that are summarized in pages 40, 41 and beyond are being still worked on by the committee. So I fully believe that this report is adoptable. It is final. It is great as 2020's reflection of where we stand. And I just wanted to point out that the Climate Action Committee is going to be coming back at us with several additional specifics and perhaps even reduced costs and better results in terms of greenhouse gas reduction.
Great, thank you, David. Any further comments, or do we have a motion?
I'd love to move that we adopt this plan.
Great, thank you, David. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Bob. Rebecca, can we have a vote, please?
Councilmember Casissa.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes, thank you very much. That brings us to item 6B, which is discussion and direction to staff regarding draft climate adaptation plan.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and RJ, if I may just jump in here for a second, and I want to speak on a real basic level to members of the community regarding some emails and discussion that I've heard, and so I want to join those members of this discussion that are new, that I don't recognize to the conversation over the past few years. Welcome, and thank you for being engaged on this conversation. It's the most important conversation that we face as a community moving forward. And I wanted to, at a high level, I wanted to set the stage for this conversation a little bit. I want to thank the community, the council, and RJ and Adam and staff for all their efforts. My comments aren't defensive. They're supportive and understanding the importance of what we're faced with. And you're going to see a map. You're going to see a map that shows half of our community and probably one of the highest fire risk zones in the state of California. And you're going to see a map that puts us in the top 3% in the nation of being impacted by sea level rise. And then you're going to see about 3 or 4 streets that aren't impacted in our community. And so when I was hired as your town manager and we started to hire our public works team, the council really wanted to have a high level view. And one of the priorities of this council was to say, look, let's build a Bible. Let's look forward. Let's go out. And how do we not only solve the problems today, but over the next decades, like however many years? Is it 10 years? Is it 20? Is it 50? Let's bring in renowned scientists to engage our community, to evaluate what we're faced with and how do we prioritize and how do we solve that? So when we're all gone in the coming years, either as residents or staff or council, we've provided a document of a decision-making matrix for future leaders to solve the problems of the future. And so this climate adaptation plan is one of the first in the Bay Area that I know of, and I researched this in the state of California. We're one of the first that really focused with Caltrans to get a grant to move forward to start this process. And so this has been an ongoing process. I'm gonna let RJ explain it. Some of the things that we've been focused on is to have the right process, to have the right conversation to move forward. And at the same time, what we did is we backed up and we said, community, we know this is a big ticket item. We know this is a big number. And so we know that we need to develop a funding stream in the future. And we need to do it now. And so 2 years ago, we communicated this with the community. And we said, look, let's pull back that flood tax, that $98 parcel tax for all residents. And let's look at the sales tax measure, right? Because our community is impacted positively and you could argue negatively by the shopping centers in some ways, right? And so let's use the sales tax funds to protect our revenue streams in our shopping centers, but also put the burden on that tax to protect our community, our residents. And so I think the community understood that. So we rescinded that property tax. And then we built in a long-term sales tax measure. It's a 3/4 cent sales tax. It brings in anywhere from $3.2 to $4 million annually. We also bring in about $1 to $1.5 million in restricted funds annually for vegetation management and fire protection, as well as capital improvement projects. So if you step back for a second, we just built a couple of years ago and moving forward about a $5.5 million revenue stream for capital improvement projects. That's our streets, our sidewalks, flood control, sea level rise that you're going to hear today, fire protection. Moving forward, 5.5 annually every year moving forward. And so right now we're going to have a 10-year conversation, and I'm going to come back to you at the next council meeting, really talking about this and really prioritizing then how we budget this $50 to $60 million revenue stream that we're guaranteed and committed to have for what we're talking about today. And then how do we prioritize it, that 60 million over 10 years? What should we do year 1 through 3, through 5 through 7, 10 years from now, right? And so this conversation tonight is the starting point. And even though it's not the starting point, I believe it's 12 to 18 months we've been talking about this, sets the stage as we move forward. So I don't want the community members to think that we've all of a sudden set a priority on one side of town to the other. We're completely committed to protecting the house, this town of Corte Madera, and we will do everything in our ability to do it. There's been some conversation about PG&E undergrounding, and so PG&E is responsible for their lines, and the town of Corte Madera is going to hold them accountable. And I hope that, Mr. Mayor, that you're able to share some of your work and the emails that you've been doing over the recent months, holding PG&E accountable to their programs and giving us a timeline and the efforts that they're going to put in to our community. And I know I've seen them, and I know the work that you've been doing, and you deserve credit for that. At the staff level, for the town manager and your public works director, we as well are working side by side with our council, our mayor, to ensure that we get a response. PG&E, as you can imagine, has it's hundreds of millions of dollars in undergrounding of high level areas in the state of California. We believe we're in the top 3%, and we are going to push hard. Maureen O'Rourke, I appreciate your emails. I appreciate your efforts. Please don't stop. We are working with you, not against you. It's a priority, and we have not set that aside. So when you look at this report, and I think there's some concerns in some of the email discussion that we're not focused on PG&E undergrounding, you better believe we are, but we're at a higher level. We're also just not looking at the town of Corte Madera, because that process to underground Christmas Tree Hill is $20 to $30 million at a high level. And honestly, it doesn't solve our problem. It doesn't solve our problem of big picture, that hillside, our town. And so we need to underground, throughout the county, throughout the state. And so there's a lot of work being done. This report isn't necessarily tied to that conversation and those efforts. So I just want to urge the community. I want you to know that I'm telling you on the record right now, but this is recorded. We are committed to protecting the house in our town. We provide more fire protection efforts in our community, in this entire county, in the Bay Area, in any of the fire areas in the state of California. I challenge anyone to compare what we're doing to anyone else in the state. And I say that We right now have a $1 million revenue stream to protect Corte Madera and Larkspur through Measure C in the Central Marin Fire Authority. We also have projects in the $5 to $10 million range over the next 10 years for big projects. There's a project that our chief, Ruben Martin, and Todd Lando are working on right now. It's a $2 to $3 million project over the next 18 months. Hopefully we're able to get a green light and get that project approved in the next couple of months through the fire authority. And what we're looking to do is a 200-foot break through the entire jurisdictions of Corte Madera and Larkspur. It's a fire mitigation break that would protect us and give our firefighters a fighting chance should we have high winds and fires coming from the west to the east of our jurisdiction. When you talk about undergrounding, do we have the ability to underground as a town? And we have $300,000 to $500,000 in PG&E funds to do undergrounding. But when you're talking about a $20 to $30 million project, that really doesn't protect us from the big picture of where the fires could actually start and impact our town. We have to step back and think a little bit bigger picture. And so I welcome those comments tonight from our community members on the Hillside, but we're committed to it. We're going to continue to engage you and make that effort moving forward. One last thing I want to tell you, when you think about the $60 million in funds, set aside, regardless of what you hear tonight or in the future, we are committed to $18 to $20 million in fire mitigation projects, education, code enforcement, and support moving forward over the next 10 years. That's dedicated to our community. And I add Larkspur to that conversation because we're absolutely committed and tied to them. I also want to say that, and I think I want to give her a shout out. Marla Orth is on this call. She spearheaded this conversation 24 months ago and really this was before Measure C at the county level, of the work she did as a chipper program and all the work we did on Christmas Tree Hill, Chapman Park, and others to really streamline and really to try to attack this problem that we as a town and really a county haven't accounted for over decades. And so we had to start somewhere. And so when you step back, when you think about budget, there's about 12 to 15 overlays of a 10-year program of what we're trying to do as a town. And just my point, I want to make sure that those that are impacted by sea level rise know that we're committed to finding a solution. Those that are impacted in the fire areas, it's right in front of you. Know that we are totally committed to problem solving this. And we know it's our number one priority. And so I just hope tonight, it's not one where staff is defensive, and it's not one where our community feels like we don't care about you, or we're not doing anything about it, or we're not listening to you. We absolutely are united on this effort moving forward. And that's all I ask. I wanted to set the stage for that. And again, I appreciate RJ, all the work that you have done, because this is our legacy as a community for future generations. And really the first level of decision making is now on the fire front, and we're committing millions of dollars annually towards that. And then our first really decision point on the sea level rise side is really, we need to do something in the next 10 years where we start to impact residents on the bay side. And then you have a bigger picture in 15 to 20 years of really protecting some of the lines of defense across the marshlands. I'm talking at a high level. RJ will correct me if I'm wrong, but really that's what we're talking about when we start to project out of decision making. But we've guaranteed a $50 to $60 million revenue stream every decade. So it's there with interest. And so I believe, without raising taxes, without doing community facility districts and things like that, we believe we have funding to attack this. Now it's the plan. And again, this is one of many conversations. And so I don't want anyone to think that we're making a decision and someone's being left behind. We are going to protect the town of Corte Madera. I guarantee you that. And so I just really want to pass that along, and I hope everyone hears me. And RJ, go ahead and take it away, and thank you for all your work.
Yeah, thank you very much, Todd. Mayor Beckman, members of the council, given the kind of comprehensiveness of this plan, we have kind of some distinct categories, and I'd like to suggest that we break them up into two parts and have a question and comment period for each. And so if that's okay with you, we would do townwide and fire strategies, and then have a comment period and then follow up with central and shoreline strategies. Great. So as Todd mentioned, this is born out of a Caltrans facilitated grant that we received back in 2018 that gave town approximately $350,000. Shortly after receiving that grant, Adaptation International was hired through a request for a proposal process due to their decades plus of experience doing exactly this for other agencies in the nation, but also several countries and so worldwide. Shortly after that, we also brought on a team known as the San Francisco Estuary Institute, who specializes in supporting agencies with these environmental concepts and strategies. And so they're also part of our shoreline team and will be speaking today as well. And going back, so yeah, this plan has been in development since December of 2018. So we've had a lot of public workshops. We've had 3 public workshops. We've had about a half dozen resilience advisory committee meetings, which consisted of other jurisdiction stakeholders, environmental agency groups, members of the community, members from the school district, environmental specialists who have really helped mold this into what you're seeing as this draft in front of you. And I wanted to also mention, this is intended to be, one of at least 2 conversations with council before adoption. This draft document was released to the public back in mid-November when we had our last public workshop. And kind of part of the goal of this plan is really to formulate what it is our best ideas, concepts based on what we know today, but it's not meant to be fixed in stone should new facts and new information come about. And so it leaves it open-ended to make those informed adjustments as we continue to learn more information. Another piece to be aware of is that, this was initiated through a Caltrans grant with a very fixed and hard deadline of this upcoming February. So it has been moving pretty aggressively, and in some ways that's good. In others, it's we haven't had the opportunity to have as many of those conversations perhaps as otherwise we would, but we're still happy with all the information and feedback and collaboration we have been able to achieve. So moving into that, I'm going to kick it over to Sasha Peterson, who's the head of Adaptation International, to give us an introduction on the plan. And like I said, we'll cover townwide vulnerabilities and fire, and then bring it back to council and public for comment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, RJ. Mayor and council members, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and support the development and then the presentation of this draft adaptation plan. My name is Sasha Peterson. I'm the founder and director of Adaptation International. And as RJ said, it's really been a collaborative process. We're the lead project partner working with the town on the development of the plan, but it's also been heavily invested in by different town departments, by that Resilience Advisory Committee, and also our core project partners from the consulting side, Nelson Nygaard, Blue Point Planning, and then the San Francisco Estuary Institute. Our goal tonight is to give you a high-level overview of the plan development process and some of the outputs from the plan. It is available, and we're not going to spend the time to go through every particular action in the plan, but we want to provide another opportunity for public comment and discussion and further council input on the direction and development of the plan. Before I get into the actual details of the plan, I do want to just highlight on this climate-focused evening that there really are 2 sides of responding, 2 aspects of responding to the climate crisis. And it's nice to see this adaptation plan discussion coming immediately following the climate action plan. So if you think of responding to climate change in these 2 big buckets of mitigation and adaptation, those actions in the climate action plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions will limit the long-term impacts of climate change. but we need to be prepared for the real and present risks that Todd spoke to earlier about that are facing the community. And this adaptation plan is designed to reduce those risks and help the town be better prepared and for those impacts. Clearly, there are some overlaps. There are actions that do both, and those are considered in the plan, but this is definitely the adaptation focus, helping the community build resilience, and complements the climate action plan that was just approved. To zoom in a little bit on RJ's timeline, the plan did start in 2018, kicked off in 2019, and had 5 key phases for the development of the plan. The first was laying the foundation, engaging with the community members, as well as advisory committee members around adaptation, exploring the options that are available to reduce those climate risks, and refining those approaches. And now we're in the final phase of the project of developing and refining the draft and finalizing the draft adaptation plan. To give you a feel of what that looked like, I know many of you have been involved in different aspects of the plan development. In early 2019, the community engagement was kicked off with 2 workshops. One focused on sea level rise and coastal flooding, hosted at the Cove School. One focused on hillside neighborhoods and wildfire risks and concern at the town center. There was a community survey that was distributed broadly to the community to identify key concerns, a couple of flood control meetings, some input from the town council, and a compilation of the best available information and existing conditions. We then dug into better understanding those risks and concerns for the community, including 5 meetings with that Resilience Advisory Committee that RJ discussed, 10 partner meetings with agencies and organizations in the region, GIS and other technical analysis to begin to craft the adaptation plan, pull from best practices around the country, and select some initial adaptation options. Those were presented to the community as a whole last summer at a virtual community workshop. Following the workshop, there was a story map and survey to gather input on those draft actions. The team spent the fall refining the actions and prioritizing them for inclusion in the plan, as well as engaging with Miller Pacific and doing some additional work to develop preliminary costs for some of the actions. And then, as RJ mentioned, the 3rd community workshop was hosted on November 19th, and along with that came the release of the draft plan. I want to remind everybody the plan itself is really based on the values that we heard through the community engagement process and from the advisory committee. And it's also science-based. It builds on the best available climate change and resilience science to help inform the development of actions that are effective, efficient, and feasible for the town. The vision of the project is to help move the town forward so that it can be one town, one region, resilient together. There are 4 overarching goals for the adaptation plan. The first highlights and reflects back many of the things that we just heard, the goal of protecting the health, safety, and well-being of all town residents, visitors, and workers by focusing on preparedness and prevention. So this is getting ahead of the curve, not waiting for extreme weather events or changing conditions to affect the community, but to take action to reduce those risks before they occur. Goal 2 is incorporating resilience and equity into all of the town's plans, policies, and projects. The idea is to move beyond a single adaptation plan, but begin to apply adaptation and resilience thinking into all the work that the town is doing, which feels like it's already happening. Goal 3 is increasing community awareness about the urgent need to take action and prepare for climate change. Again, you have a very literate climate community here, and so it's building upon that. Goal 4 is bringing the community, neighboring towns, and the region together to plan for and importantly fund actions to build resilience. We know that climate change and climate impacts won't stop at municipal boundaries, and that some of the more complicated investments to reduce those risks or be better prepared will require collaboration with neighboring jurisdictions and agencies. I know the council members all know this, but in case there's someone listening in that doesn't, it's important to reiterate that climate change isn't an issue for the future. It's something that is affecting the community now. You can see from the picture on the left how extreme precipitation events from those atmospheric rivers can create localized flood issues and disrupt transportation networks. You can see from the picture on the right, which is taken of a king tide a couple of years ago, how residential infrastructure and transportation infrastructure is already being affected even without a storm during those major tide events. We also know that the hillside neighborhoods within the community are part of the charm of the community. They add to what makes Corte Madera a desirable place to live, but many of the steps, lanes, and paths, as well as the roads in those hillside areas, are narrow and winding and can limit access or potentially impede egress during an emergency. So many of the things that make the town unique and a special place are also some of the things that contribute to or exacerbate the climate-related risks. And we'll get to those maps that were mentioned in just a second. As a quick highlight, some of the climate exposures that the plan is designed to help the community prepare for are highlighted here, taking them from left to right. We know that droughts are likely to increase as higher temperatures increase evaporation and evapotranspiration in dry soils. So what happened a few years ago is likely to become more frequent or more intense in the future. Wildfire risk, we don't need to go into those details. We know that anywhere in Northern California is at risk from wildfires, and that risk is increasing. Extreme heat, which hasn't been an issue for communities around the Bay Area in the past, is likely to become one in the future as temperatures are projected to rise on average 7 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century, creating more than twice as many extreme heat events, which could be particularly challenging for older adults or those with existing medical conditions. Inland flooding is an issue that's likely to continue and to become more frequent as extreme precipitation from heavy storms becomes more frequent. And then sea level rise. We all know that sea levels are rising and will continue to rise for centuries, and may rise up to 2 feet even just by the middle of the century, or even 7 feet by the end of the century. And to give you a glimpse of what that looks like, here's the town with 3 additional feet above the current mean high water line. So sea level rise of 3 feet or a big storm has the potential to flood significant portions of the community. So it is a real and present risk. In order to address those risks, the town, as RJ mentioned, decided to focus on developing actions in 4 key buckets. So first, looking at town-wide actions, and then looking specifically at 3 key focus areas: the hillsides, the central portions of the community, and then the shoreline neighborhoods. By focusing in on those neighborhoods, many of those climate exposures will be seen across the community. By focusing in on shoreline, central, and hillside neighborhoods allowed the plan to really look at specific climate exposures such as wildfire and coastal flooding, and develop unique adaptation actions for each of those neighborhoods. Before we go into the individual actions, I do just want to highlight this idea of an adaptation pathway. So this goes to what was said before the even start of the presentation, and is that adaptation is a process. It's not the result of a single project. It's not the result of a passing of an adaptation plan. The town doesn't suddenly become resilient. The idea is that these actions and this plan can set a roadmap that the town can use for the decades to come. And that in this case, this adaptation pathway for Mariner Cove and Marina Village starts with one near-term action that then can lead into the implementation or selection of 1 or more additional actions, such as reinforcing levees, installing or building coarse beaches, monitoring groundwater. And then over time, it's important to monitor those actions, ensure that they are being successful and being effective, and maybe identify thresholds at which point either further action will need to be taken or a shift away from that strategy when it starts to become ineffective. So it is a process, it's a journey, and this adaptation plan is the next step on that journey. So as RJ mentioned, we will start with just a highlight of some of the adaptation actions for the town as a whole, and then for the hillside section, and then we'll pause and have public comment and discussion. these actions that we will show this evening are not by any means the breadth of actions. Many more are available in the draft adaptation plan. As a part of the process, the town developed a library of actions, more than 400 potential actions that were then evaluated based on their feasibility, efficiency, and effectiveness. And the actions that scored the best and were brought into the draft adaptation plan and highlighted as priorities. Tonight, we're clearly not going to get anywhere near 400. We're just going to highlight a few to give you a sense and feel for the types of actions that are incorporated into the plan. So townwide actions include examples such as the ones shown on the screen. So one example action is to invest in creating resilience hubs, and that green text down at the bottom adds to that. It's investing in community centers or schools so that these areas become community assets and expand their functionality during everyday life, but also become evacuation centers, cooling centers, charging stations during extreme weather events. Another action is to potentially identify or hire a climate resilience coordinator. As climate adaptation becomes more prevalent and there are more projects, it may require additional staff time in order to coordinate and ensure the implementation of those projects. Requiring that climate change is considered in all plans, policies, and programs is another action that speaks to that goal of moving beyond a standalone adaptation plan and beginning to implement that into everything that the town does. Ensuring that town buildings have smoke and particulate filtration systems ties back into that resilience hubs and reduces the impact of wildfires, even if they're not occurring immediately in the immediate vicinity. We all know that smoke can affect the quality of life of residents on an annual basis. And then working with regional utilities to enhance preparedness, protection, and resilience of all types of utility infrastructure, ranging from water and energy, as was mentioned, to telecommunications infrastructure. Moving into a snapshot of the hillside area. And you can see here, the picture of the hillsides, but then if you look at that map on the right-hand side, it really highlights the WUI zone, the wildland urban interface. So those areas shown in red are areas that have been designated as at higher wildfire risk because of the proximity of the forests. We know that this is a fairly accurate description of areas that are of concern, but also that wildfire could spread or occur and impact the community as a whole. CAL FIRE has created fire designations. This old map that they created highlights medium, high, and very high fire severity risk zones. It probably, from the perspectives that we've heard from fire marshal and community residents, underestimates the actual risk in the region. But it's worth highlighting because you can see here right along the edge of the town boundary, this very high fire severity risk zone. And if we zoom out even more, it goes to Town Manager Cusimano's description of this wildfire is a regional risk. It doesn't, these CAL FIRE maps designate fire severity for their area of jurisdictions. And you can see the local responsibility areas are not shown to have fire risk because it's not within CAL FIRE's jurisdiction to take action there. But here again, this very high fire hazard severity zone borders the town of Corte Madera. And we know that, a significant number of members of the community and buildings are in that wildland urban interface. About 49% of Corte Madera structures are in that zone, and with almost $2 billion worth of commercial and residential property. So the adaptation plan highlights a mix of both policy and educational elements, as well as infrastructure investments that could be used to reduce that risk. So some of the policy actions are to support other modes of transportation, maybe going back to the climate action plan and investing in electric vehicle charging stations for e-bikes or vehicles to create, both enhancements to everyday quality of life and diversify transportation, but also create another way to move during an emergency event. Also, considerations are potentially restricting further development in the WUI to avoid putting more people at risk. building wildfire resilience stations. These areas taken from work that's been done in the Oakland Hills to create kind of a mini resilience hub that can be used by local community members within the hillside neighborhoods. Coordinating with PG&E to underground electric power lines. We've talked about that this evening. And identifying opportunities to support the neighborhood resource groups to increase community and neighborhood cohesion, enhance the ability for the neighborhoods to support each other, and be able to evacuate or respond during extreme weather events. There are also additional infrastructure improvements, and I'm going to turn it over to RJ in a minute, but I do want to highlight the work that was completed by Nelson Nygaard as part of the team to look at the transportation networks in all of the hillsides and consider and evaluate where additional enhancements to those transportation networks could improve the ability for emergency vehicles to access hillsides if needed, and for residents to evacuate if needed. I'm not going to go into this table, but just shows you that the work that Nelson Nygaard did to evaluate different policy options, as well as the use of strategic pullouts or new connections, and to look at the potential cost of those investments, and then also the number of households that would benefit from a particular intervention. So RJ, I will turn it over to you and let you talk about some more of the details about the potential infrastructure investments in the hillside.
Yeah, if you could please back up one slide, that'd be great. So as Sasha mentioned, we looked at, what are some deficiencies in our infrastructure network? This is one set of approaches that Nelson and Nygaard took on, and this is what came out of those results. They've identified a number of areas that either need to be widened. There's potential for a new connection, whether that connection is available 24/7 or solely in emergencies. That's all yet to be determined. This doesn't take away from any of those policy related strategies. It doesn't mean that, we solely focus on a new connection, on widening a road. Those go in tandem with these other options of, pushing for, hardened facilities and structures and vegetation management, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. But in this analysis, it became very apparent, as I think many already knew or had a sense of, was that, Christmas Tree Hill is very limited in its ability to evacuate that hillside. Many of the streets are extremely narrow, steep, windy, all the above. So there is definitely, from what we've seen, an emphasis that should be made on Christmas Tree Hill due to their existing conditions when we compare that to Chapman Hill, Granada. Doesn't mean there aren't opportunities on those areas as well, but just from the analysis, that's one kind of large nugget that has come through. 2 slides ahead, please. So as we went through, as mentioned early on, this is meant to be a kind of working document, and so as we are wrapping up this adaptation plan, what are the initial things that we should focus on? And this is kind of where we've decided to put, some of these recommendations, and would love to have some feedback from the public and council if we're in the right direction. And as mentioned prior, this is the first of at least one more conversation with council and the community amongst all the other ones we've had prior at the workshops. But when it comes time in the near future to pave Summit Drive, should we invest that additional money for that widening, for that improvements to those roadway facilities? There's an opportunity on Lower Summit Fire Road to improve that, either for improved access for fire or for possible dual direction ingress and egress in an emergency, potentially with civilians that we could explore. Possibly new connections. I'm not going to speak to every single one, but as you can see through the list, really improving the capacity of our network and the efficiency of our network is really the main focus here. Next slide, please. And here are a couple more that, we've also identified as possible new connections that, because of the challenges, whether it be the topography or adjacent private lands or other things. This plan didn't have all the resources and funding to really dive into. So these are ones that we see some potential, but really more so would need to be studied further. So we wouldn't recommend at this time jumping into implementing these at the price tag shown, but more some sort of a feasibility or further preliminary and engineering analysis to see if these are good options to improve our network at the, for our roads and other facilities. Next slide. And so with that, we're at the question and discussion segment for the first half of our presentation. And we'll turn it back to Mayor Beckman and the council for any questions and so forth.
RJ, can I just add one thing? If it's appropriate at this time, you tell me yes or no. So we have Chief Martin on the call as well from the fire department. Would this be appropriate too to tie in some of the work that's being done through Measure C also on the evacuation routes? It's not documented here, but we did discuss it about how we're improving potential roadways and ingress, egress. Would that be the appropriate time for the chief to jump in?
Or unless you want to allow public comment, but either or.
I'm just gonna, Chief, so you can get some sleep tonight. Can you just jump in and share also with everyone on some of the work on Christmas Tree Hill, Chapman Park, on some of the evacuation routes?
Sure, Todd. Thank you, Mayor Beckman, members of the council. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I've been working with RJ and Sasha as part of their climate adaptation plan to try to take a look at where here locally some of the issues we have with the evacuation. Of course, number one being is Christmas Tree Hill. So we took a drive and drove and tried to identify certain areas where we locally can improve that. But at the Marin County Fire Chief level, we've been meeting regularly over the last year after the formation of Measure C to try to come up with an overall plan for evacuations. That's one of our measures with Measure C, or at least one of our guiding points. We met this week and to try to finalize with a company called Safe Haven, who identifies evacuation routes and does evacuation mapping studies for local jurisdictions. They've done them for Contra Costa County. I believe there's San Mateo County. They did them recently for Sonoma County during the glass fire, and were able to implement it. They're going to be coming in to the county through Measure C to try to do an overall evacuation study of every community, which includes Corte Madera, to try to figure out where the choke points are and what are some of the solutions that, as at a local level, what we can do to improve upon. And that's just one component, is identifying where roadways can be widened, where pullouts can be installed, but also identifies where we can remove some vegetation along the roadways to try to improve those evacuations, especially during wildfires. With that, I will turn it back over to RJ unless you have any questions for me.
Thanks, Chief.
Yeah, we certainly know there's going to be comment from the public about specific fire-related issues, and I think my thought was allow those comments to be made, and then we'll be happy to respond to them as much as needed.
Perfect. Okay, so we will get to questions from council and then public comment in just a sec. Right before we do, I was just wondering, Chief, would you be willing to very briefly just speak to some of the adaptation work with regards to fire that's already going on in town? And I'm specifically talking about our vegetation management programs.
Absolutely. So as Todd Cusimano mentioned, this was all spearheaded a couple years ago by Marla Orth, utilizing some of that Measure F tax override money. And so she spearheaded our chipper program here locally, began a lot of the work on evacuation routes. Since then, we were able to acquire over $1 million grant through CAL FIRE, which did a lot of the evacuation clearing, basically removing a lot of the vegetation on the hill along the shoulders of the roadway, raising the canopies of the trees over the roadways, try to remove trees that were entangled within power lines and so forth to improve upon that. And then earlier this year, the voters of Marin understood the need for wildfire protection throughout the county. So we passed Measure C, which brings to the town of Corte Madera and Larkspur. And I lump us together because we have to start looking at fire safety holistically. So between both of our communities, we're bringing in just close to $1 million for vegetation management, fuels reduction projects, defensible space, and to try to improve any kind of our evacuation routes. With that, we've been doing, with Todd Lando's help, I think we've got active 29 projects within both communities that are both chipper programs, improving evacuation routes, removing hazardous fuels throughout the community. And then we've also, as Todd mentioned, is we've got a proposal into Measure C for their first core funded projects. So when we start talking about the $1 million that come to the communities, that's only 40% of the taxes raised between Larkspur and Corte Madera. So you start looking at 60% is still out there for these core funded projects. And the goal is to try to create a 200-foot fuel break on the backside of every property that abuts up against open space and water district. So it kind of creates that little shaded fuel break or park-like setting behind every home that will eventually give us that fighting chance in the event that a wildfire impacts our community.
Great, thank you, Chief. And I'm glad you mentioned, the importance of addressing fire hazard holistically, both in terms of, geographically right, that no town is an island, but also in terms of the whole breadth of tools that we have to have in our toolbox and be evaluating and using them all at the same time, as opposed to zeroing in on any one solution, because there is no silver bullet, of course. So with that, I'm going to open this up to council members for any questions for staff, and then we'll open it up to public comment. We'll start with Charles.
All right, two quick ones. One is some of those proposals show cost to actually connect with adjacent communities via improvements to fire roads and that type of thing. So is that a shared cost that we would share with, and have we touched on it with other communities, or is that just if we did it alone, and so therefore they could actually reduce and be even more effective? I think it'd be good to clarify that. That's some of the discussion we've had with that report in general is, that collaboration and the cost sharing. And then the other one is that's $1 million annually, Ruben, for the maintenance of the brush, or is that just a one-time cost?
So this is an annual revenue stream. So the Measure C is a 10-year tax. Unless we get it approved again by the voters. So start thinking about that steady revenue stream for fuels reduction.
Thanks. And then, so one other one, I know Todd has already broached it, but yet there is a new discussion about the undergrounding, and it was mentioned in the report. But as where the larger capital project is quite expensive and ultimately owned by a different agency, in my understanding of some of the most recent fires, it was these larger carrier lines and then also the distribution centers that were the big enough sparks during these windstorms and dry periods that really caused these major fires. So my question to Ruben a little bit is undergrounding all wires ultimately the real cause, or is it like just the transformers or certain substations, and that those could be hardened and dealt with more quickly and really reduce it by quite a substantial amount? Just kind of a question to kind of heal the dialogue so that, we can understand a path forward and do what's best as quickly as possible.
Right. I think some of that may be slightly above my pay grade when it starts coming into prioritizing PG&E hardening. But they are working to harden their infrastructure. A lot of times it comes from their insulators or their transformers that'll blow, bring sparks down. And then, of course, there's trees that are coming down into their lines. So they basically right now are going through hardening their infrastructure. What the ultimate cost of that is going to be, I have no idea. But then again, you got to start looking at undergrounding power lines at a holistic approach as well. We could probably consider undergrounding every single power line within the town of Corte Madera. But if nothing happens to the north, south, and west of us, we're still impacted by the same dangers. There isn't one silver bullet.
Thank you, Chief.
Great,
And,
thank you, Charles.
If I may add to that on that note, so Ruben spoke of PG&E's plans. There's a 500-page document on their webpage called 2020 Wildfire Mitigation Plan, and it speaks to some of their goals. Talks about new grid technology, hardening, accelerated inspections, enhanced veg management, and then monitoring. And we're actually, believe it or not, seeing some of that, since the round of fires, since the PSPS events. They're installing what I kind of call valves, and they're able to shut off specific areas of town that are higher risk and keep the other areas open. And they're looking at undergrounding as one listed activity. To what extent and what funding level, we don't know yet. And we'll certainly dive into it as much as we can, as much as the information's out there. And but yeah, I wanted to share that and share also the unpredictable nature of fires. Believe it or not, there's a little more certainty on the sea level rise front, and we can speak to that later in the presentation. One other thing I forgot to touch on the central portion of town, the main focus there is to, and we've already raised this up at prior council meetings through our budget discussions, but prioritizing a new storm drain master plan that also looks into these projections on climate change, increased rain events, looking at our detention basins that haven't been reviewed for a couple decades, and we don't know if they've reduced their capacity, analyzing our pump stations to make sure all of our flood control systems are where we want them to be. And so that's something that we'll be moving forward here, hopefully in the next month, as part of a request for proposal to a consultant team to lead that.
Great, thank you, RJ. Fred, I saw your hand.
Yeah, hey, RJ, can you just clarify the process that we're going to go through for this? In other words, there's like 7 or 8, I'll say, potential action items. Are we looking at between this meeting and the next meeting, getting community input and trying to prioritize those items? And that's what's going to go in the plan. But then we'd have to couple that with the other 2 areas also. So can you just describe what the process is and what we're trying to plan for or move forward with?
Yeah, some of them are bigger pieces that are going to take multiple years. The storm drain master plan, it's a 300K or so effort. It likely will take 2 or so years, just like this climate adaptation plan took. But we want to initiate that process and get it going. Other ones can be very quick. If we talk about Summit Drive and looking at widening that as an opportunity, well, that one, if it lines up with our paving project, immediately we're going to expand our scope, not just to repave that street, but also look at those widening opportunities. Some are easier. There's, over by Skunk Hollow, it's a pretty flat terrain, and right now it's not connected. And I'm not saying we want to connect it 24/7 because, perhaps that's not in the neighborhood's best interest, but in the opportunity for evacuation route, have the procedures in place where we can, pull up a bollard and have that facility there and use it as access. That's a fairly simple one that we could move forward, if it was prioritized at the top list within a year. So there's some ebb and flow here. And as we get into the next presentation, I can try and shine a better light on that.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you, Fred. Any other questions for staff or for Sasha and his team before we open this up to the public? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we're going to go ahead and open this up for public comment right now. So any members of the public who would like to comment on the portion of this report that we've heard, which pertains to adaptation for central and hillside parts of town, specifically with relation to wildfire, anything related to that, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Our first hand is from Maureen.
Hi, can you hear me this time?
Yes, thank you.
I hope you can.
Yes.
Thanks for giving us a chance to talk about this. We're, as you know, highly interested in this adaptation plan that you have. The thing that I'm concerned about, and our many people on the Hill is that the plan that you have actually provided to us right now is only a plan for, primarily a plan for evacuation and some mitigation in terms of tree clearing and such. But it is not a plan to actually remedy the project, which would be to do undergrounding, which we've been asking for years and years now. And you can imagine our concern when we see a plan that does not address undergrounding basically at all, and how we are distrustful of this plan because the undergrounding aspects are not discussed. They haven't been evaluated as seriously as the sea level issues. And we don't have dollar numbers. We don't have any true assessment of this in that plan. And we're 50% of the residents of this community. And so we do expect to see very specific discussion about undergrounding in this plan and what the town's actual plan is and what's being done. And I really hope that the town council will take this seriously, that we're extremely concerned about this. We are afraid we're going to lose our homes. Every day we are afraid of fire. You hear a fire engine and you worry when we live on this hill. We are not adversaries of the town. We are residents fearful of losing our homes. And I am sorry that we have seemed to be perceived as adversaries. We don't want to be, but we do expect to get equal treatment in this plan. And we do expect to see a true discussion of undergrounding in the plan and what the town means to do about it. And Todd, you know how we have felt about this for a long time, wondering what's happening and not being kept informed. And then when we see the plan and there's one paragraph, really one paragraph about undergrounding, it's very disturbing. And that's really, we hope that you will seriously consider what we have to say. So thank you for your time. And no, we are not going away. We are very determined on this front. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Maureen. We're going to hear next from Matt and then Kevin. And that is Matt Kaufman and then Kevin.
Okay, can you hear me, Council?
Yes.
Okay, great. Mr. Mayor, members of the council and staff, I'm here to express my concerns regarding wildfire safety in our community. As you've seen over the past several years, wildfires have had a devastating consequence in California, especially when coupled with drought conditions, high winds, freak weather events like we had this summer, quite frankly, the thunderstorms. So I was happy to see that we have a climate adaptation plan that addresses many issues that impact us, and that includes flooding. And quite frankly, flooding is an important issue and it should be addressed. But we are concerned that the climate adaptation plan falls short when it comes to wildfire safety. And it just lists, as Maureen mentioned, one paragraph regarding undergrounding of power lines and does not estimate the costs or identify the potential funding sources that we could be used to underground in our community. Many residents have had meetings and discussions with town council and staff about this. As Maureen just mentioned, we've really gotten nowhere on this topic. And we recently sent a letter to the town council and staff summarizing our concerns and suggesting possible solutions that were included in the letter to this very important issue. And I'm just going to read a response that we received from Vice Mayor David Kuhnhart on this. And I think this is important. He wrote to us and said, even though you misspelled my name, I received your message. Could you please estimate the total length of electrical wires you hope to have undergrounded? Are you expecting, quote, demanding, unquote, for the telephone and cable lines to be undergrounded? Do you have any independent estimates for costs? Thank you for supporting our climate adaptation work underway. To say the least, we were taken aback by this response regarding our safety concerns. I had not heard of residents providing values such as linear feet of wire or seeking independent cost estimates on capital improvement projects in our town. That said, I thought I would check with the Public Works Director to see if this is a standard practice. And according to the Director of Public Works, apparently this is in some cases. However, did the residents estimate the cost that was included in the climate adaptation plan, which quotes $44 million for flooding? The answer is no. The city actually paid, or the town paid $10,000 to have this very approximate figure drawn up. Flooding is a 10 or 15, 20-year issue. Fires are now. We need to make this happen. We respectfully ask the council to direct staff to include a solid undergrounding strategy and associated budget in the climate adaptation plan. And this will also hopefully answer some of Vice Mayor's questions regarding the length of wire that's needed to underground. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Matt. We're going to go to Matt Walker next.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Town Council, for having me. I'm fairly new to this discussion as we moved to Christmas Tree Hill about 2 years ago, but I want to echo Maureen and Matt Kaufman's comments about our concerns about the threat of fire on the hill. And Matt really said it much better than I can at this point, but I would like to point out that there have been several comments about whether it was due to transformers or larger electric stations that had sparked some of the fires. Having friends who live in Santa Rosa and a friend who lived in Paradise, and talking to them about PG&E's dealings with the community after these fires, I think it's all well and good for the council to have, to be committed, quote unquote, to working with PG&E. I don't trust PG&E at all. And quite frankly, I don't care, what portion of their power equipment caused the fires up in Santa Rosa or in Paradise. The issue is that they clearly think that their equipment is a problem because they shut it off whenever the winds get high. And it's not just to transformers, large equipment. This is power to our houses. With increasing temperatures, over the next 100 years, what do they say, 7 degrees? We're seeing more and more hot days during the summer into the fall. And I need to install an air conditioner in my house. And if I have my power shut off because they're concerned about their elevated lines, for a large portion of that, my house is going to become unlivable. So I really think that it is important to have something in writing, a plan in place, and have a commitment from the town that they're going to do more than be committed to working. There needs to be some type of plan in effect that's, some portion of this plan where the undergrounding is written in. I am not saying that you're not doing a good job considering defensible space. I think that a seawall or a levee is a very important part of this plan. I just want to sort of voice my concern and echo the sentiments of others by saying that I hope that you'll take a second look at this and include some more language and a better plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. We're going to hear from Alexander next. Oh, it looks like he has just lowered his hand. We don't have any other hands up onto, oh, here it is again. Okay, well, we're going to hear from Alexander and then Jean.
I apologize, I accidentally clicked it twice. Thank you so much. We're new to the area. We moved about a month ago. We would like to echo the concerns that have been raised about undergrounding. I've looked over a report and I've looked over the deck. Thank you so much. Lots of emphasis is made on preventative, not preventive measures, reactionary. I see $4 million is allocated for widening roads and doing other kind of stuff, but nothing to prevent. $4 million, that's 2 miles of undergrounding. That's a lot of houses. So I would echo everyone else's statement and say, like, top of the reasons of fires, one of the top in California is electrical wires. And there is very little focus on that. And how can we be preventative about it? Mr. Todd has mentioned a few times that it's not going to solve a problem. How so? it is a fact that undergrounding prevents a lot of instances and at 90% reduction of outages. So there are a lot of benefits to it. And in fact, long-term benefits for undergrounding outweighs initial costs. In fact, initial costs could be also split up. I would like to know what was done for that. Each city is able to set up a special district to tax themselves for this type of funding. Has that been done? I would like to know that. Thank you. That's all my question.
Thank you very much. We're going to hear from Jean next and then Kevin. And Jean,
okay.
oh, there you are.
Yeah, no, hi, here I am. Thank you. I'd also like to support what folks have said on the phone. I've been on Christmas Tree Hill for 21 years, and I actually have a weather station on top of my house and have been monitoring the winds that come down through the valley here, and it's quite excessive, more so than what you would get on the lower part of Corte Madera.
We just lost Jean, it seems. So we're going to go to Kevin next, and I'm going to hope that Jean is able to reconnect, and then we'll try and hear the rest of her comment. So right now we're going to go to Kevin.
Hi, this is actually Colin Woodall. I'm Kevin's wife. We live up on 400 Summit Drive. We have 2 power lines that sit right outside of our house. In the 20 years that we have lived here, we've had these power lines actually come down. They've both come down because trees, the redwoods, have topped themselves and they have brought the power lines down. Luckily, both of these times these power lines came down, they actually came down during the winter months, so it was during the rainy season. But if it had been during another time of the year, the top of the hill would have caught on fire and our house would have gone up in flames very quickly. It took at least 20 minutes for when the last power line went down about a year ago. It was in December, and it took about 20 minutes for the fire department to respond. That is not feasible when you have dry conditions and you have the possibility of fires, especially up on a hill that has, when we're at the top of the hill, the evacuation routes are very tenuous. We have, little time, 1, to get out, and 2, to find a route that is feasible to get down off of the top of the hill. If you talk about undergrounding power lines, it should, if you're thinking about possibly doing it on sections of the hill, I would see that the top of the section of Christmas Tree Hill would be the first place to start. We get winds up here of sometimes 50 to 70 miles an hour. The winds that typically affect us the most are the ones coming from the east. And as we know, when they do come from the east, they are continuing to dry the vegetation, and they are continuing to be the most risky winds for fire season. It's not the winds coming from the west, because those are the humid winds and usually driven by the fog. As far as vegetation is concerned, PG&E doesn't do a very good job up here. We have bay trees right now outside of our house that are practically growing into the power lines. They did not come this past summer to cut them, and we rarely see them being regularly trimmed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see, I'm hoping that Jean is going to be able to reconnect at some point and finish her comment. I see one hand up again from a resident who has already spoken. I just want to make sure everybody knows that everyone can only speak once on this, just to be fair to everybody. Wouldn't be fair to let some people come back more than once. We're going to hear next from Brandon and then Tracy. We're of course going to make sure that everybody who hasn't gotten a chance to speak and wants to gets a chance. So it's going to be Brandon now and then Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, council members, members of the Public Works and Planning Departments. This has been a great presentation so far. I've learned a lot, and I appreciate you hearing our comments. As Vice Mayor Kuhnhart knows from living on the Hill for so long, this has been an issue near and dear to the hearts of Christmas Tree Hill residents, and I'm sure for other hillside community residents. I'm encouraged to see some reference in the adaptation plan to work with the utilities. I would just emphasize that I think now is really the time to hold PG&E accountable and take advantage of the current situation that we're all in, that they're in. They have work to do, and I don't want to see them skate on that. I would agree with some of the other comments. They do not do a very good job with their current mitigation efforts of pruning trees. And in the long run, undergrounding is probably a better investment of their money. And, I don't know about how all the funding is going to work, but I think it's just a great opportune time to hold the utility accountable and take some steps here. So I'm really hopeful that you all will do that. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Brandon. We're going to hear from Tracy next.
Good evening. I wanted to thank Mayor Beckman, Vice Mayor Kuhnhart, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Martin, and other council members and RJ and the other departments who are on this call. I really appreciate your listening to the public. I wanted to weigh in on our collective desire to have a better look in the adaptation plan to undergrounding the wires on Christmas Tree Hill, not only there, but also in other parts of Corte Madera where I live, particularly in Chapman Park. It would be a welcome change. I've lived here since 1997, invested deeply in the community and adore where I live. I believe that we need to consider some of the points made by council members and others around other towns that surround us who may not be investing in undergrounding, but I don't think that we should rely on other adjunct towns and cities to drive our desire to make change. I think we need to lead on this. And I think that the money spent by PG&E on checking wires, helicoptering, communicating with us around what they're doing when winds come up, all of those points are very, very duly noted on this call. And if all of that money got invested and plowed into undergrounding, I think it would be money very well spent. 2 years ago, during the first fire season, I had a line down in a tree right outside my house during a very windy day when all of Sonoma County was evacuated. And I'll tell you, yes, PG&E came within 20 minutes with cherry pickers and resolved the problem. But if I'm only one example, as our other neighbors on this call, of that happening, we may as well, again, plow time, energy, and funds, resources, and potentially a bond effort into undergrounding and lead our community in Marin County. So I would implore the council members and those on the call who have an opportunity to make change here to support our efforts in the adaptation plan, hold PG&E accountable, and underground wires. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. We do not have any other hands up on Zoom at this time. Rebecca, do we have any emailed public comments on this item from residents who have not had a chance to speak in person in this meeting yet?
Yes, I still have 4 emails that were received. 2 were received prior to 5 p.m. and are available on the town's website, and 2 were submitted during the course of the meeting. I can read all 4, or I can read the 2 that are not on the website yet, whichever.
I think if you wouldn't mind, just per our policy, it's an extra 6 minutes, but if we could read at least 3 minutes of all 4 of them, I think that would be great.
Okay. I'll start with the 2 that are already up. Being from Beth O'Neill, who says, to the Corte Madera Town Council, I know we share a great concern about wildfires. As a Christmas Tree Hill dweller for almost 20 years, I have spent many sleepless nights listening to the wind and going through my checklist of what to do if the worst happened. This danger compelled me to join the CTH NRG, where I serve as a zone coordinator. I am CERT certified and have taken Bader and advanced first aid. I tell you this because I want you to know that my interest, shared by many Christmas Tree Hill residents, is to actively support the town's effort to mitigate wildfire risk and save lives. As much as CTH NRG has done to educate ourselves and neighbors There's something I want you to help us with. As part of your climate adaptation plan, I would like the town council to work with PG&E and make CTH part of their pilot undergrounding program. I'd like you to make public funds available to support undergrounding and to work with the California PUC to ensure PG&E funds this pilot. I understand this is a costly undertaking, yet the lives of 250 families who live on the Hill are at risk. We are also finding it increasingly challenging to get homeowners insurance. Last year, I sought to change providers and quickly learned that I was lucky to have coverage at all. I couldn't even get brokers to give me quotes. It's not too great a leap to see our home values diminish if we continue on this trajectory that will impact our tax base and community at large. What I can commit to you, CTH NRG will do our part to help residents prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters. I want you to help us to never have to activate due to a wildfire. Regrettably, I cannot attend your meeting tonight, but I want to vigorously raise my hand in support of PG&E's pilot undergrounding program being a significant part of your climate adaptation plan. I know you have a very hard job, and I thank you for your service. Beth O'Neill.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Beth.
And the next one is from Jonathan Maslow, who says, members of the council, I will leave it to my fellow Christmas Tree Hill residents to voice our unified concerns about undergrounding. Maureen O'Rourke and others are much more knowledgeable than I am about this, but we must all agree that these concerns should at the very least be considered. My concern is with the response we received from Vice Mayor Kuhnhart, wherein he sarcastically asked us to estimate the length of wire required and to provide him with an independent cost analysis. This was a display unworthy of any town official whose job it is to find solutions, hear opinions, and consider the needs of town residents. We are engaged in a civil and polite discussion. Kuhnhart, who seems to have been offended that there was a typo misspelling his name, is not acting in the public's best interest as vice mayor. He is clearly not taking a very important issue seriously and seems to be offended and insulted by our petition. I guess these days putting your fragile ego first is now accepted political behavior. I hereby ask, based on his inability to act and respond responsibly, that Kuhnhart be removed from his position and certainly excused from any role in consideration of this petition. Jonathan Maslow.
Thank you, Jonathan.
And the next one is from Mark Levy, who says, good evening, Rebecca. Todd spoke about our inability to fund this project given its expense. I would simply ask, what is the opportunity cost? It is incalculable. The line project could be accomplished in stages over a period of years as opposed to all at once. How can we negate the obvious, namely that all recent fires have begun due to the danger of above ground lines? In addition, it is a fact that weather events will only worsen. Where is the logic here? Any group reviewing this issue should include representatives of Christmas Tree Hill. Thank you for vetting and publicizing my comments. Mark Levy, co-chair, Christmas Tree Hill NRG.
Thank you very much, Mark.
And the final one is from Soren Jensen, who says, dear Town Council, I do applaud the Town Council's recent adaptation of the climate adaptation plan. I do second the points about the critical need for undergrounding utilities on Christmas Tree Hill and potential other hillside neighborhoods in Corte Madera to mitigate the extreme fire danger that are facing us every year during a longer and longer fire season. Undergrounding utilities is common sense, both from a fire mitigation perspective and also from an economical point of view. Undergrounding utilities requires minimal maintenance compared to above ground wires. This might not be the case from the point of view of PG&E, who are paid for maintaining their above ground infrastructure through standard utility bill, but in reality have been deferring this maintenance at the expense of its ratepayers' safety. Most developed countries have long ago realized that putting utilities underground makes good business sense and good sense from a society safety perspective. I urge you to reconsider putting the plan for undergrounding utilities on Christmas Tree Hill and other hillside neighborhoods in Corte Madera, excuse me, in the climate adaptation plan and create a real plan to move this project forward for the safety of the community. Best regards, Soren T. Jensen.
Great, thank you, Soren. Rebecca, thank you very much for reading those. We have one more hand up here on Zoom. It is the account is Christmas Tree Hill NRG. So I would just ask that if you're one of the people that we've heard from already in the emails who was associated with the NRG, that you know, we can't let you speak again, unfortunately, because that wouldn't be fair to everyone else. But I'm going to bring you on now in the hopes that you are a new caller.
Hello, I am a new caller. My name's Stephen Kaplan. I want to thank the staff and town council for putting in the effort to address these really serious issues related to climate change. A couple of comments I have. We are one of the homeowners who actually did lose our homeowners insurance a couple of years ago. Liberty Mutual, who we had since we moved into our home in 2007, informed us with very little notice that they were no longer insuring homes on the Hill due to high risk. You can imagine, I'm assuming some of you are also homeowners, what anxiety that creates when you get a letter from your home insurers about your vulnerability. Fortunately, at least at this time, we were able to secure homeowners insurance from another carrier. I would like you to consider an idea that I've had that to me from an economic standpoint makes sense. My question is, why are not the insurance companies looking to underwrite the costs of some of these improvements? So if it costs, for example, $20 to $30 million to underground the utilities on this hill, that is pocket change to the costs that the insurance companies would incur should there be a wildfire on this hill. So I would encourage you to think about that strategy, maybe in concert with some of the other communities in Marin, to approach some of these carriers with that idea. I don't think I've heard that being tried before. And the last thing I would say is, don't forsake the good for the great. Some of the comments you've heard, even if you could take in a piecemeal way, undergrounding some of the utilities on this hill over a longer period of time, instead of looking at this as a $30 million project, but to look at it more short-term and in increments. And think about reprioritizing, as somebody had said, from widening streets, taking, for example, that $4 million and seeing how far that goes to underground utilities. That's a prevention strategy, as opposed to how do we get off this hill in case of you know what. So I would like for you to create the process for our community to be involved in a discussion about reprioritizing those items that you've identified for the Hill. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We do not have any other members of the public waiting to comment at this time, so we are going to go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion and direction to staff on the portion of the draft climate adaptation plan related to strategies for the hillside and central areas of town. I just kind of wanted to frame, tee up that discussion there. I think, residents have raised a lot of really good points tonight. I think we understand that fire is a critical concern in town. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about one critical, concept here. And I think I speak for all my colleagues when I say that there is absolutely no trade-off between flood protection and fire protection. I think we all see it that these are equal threats that really impact the entire town of Corte Madera. I think Todd said it really well. What our business is protecting the house, and that means every last corner of Corte Madera. And both flood and fire, frankly, are challenges of the past, present, and future. Corte Madera has a history of terrible flooding, and it also has a history of terrible wildfire going back to the early 1900s. I know there was a horrible fire on Mount Tam. And so both of these threats are already here with us today. They've been with us, and they're going to continue to get worse. So I really just wanted to kind of reiterate that we see both of these as the primary threats, and neither of them is considered to be more important or of higher priority than the other to us. I think so. I think that's a critical thing. I just want to make sure that we all understand that going forward. Another thing that I wanted to say is I just want to, reemphasize that the folks that we're hearing from tonight, you guys are not adversaries of the town. The very opposite. You guys are some of our most vulnerable residents living, on Christmas Tree Hill, deep in the WUI, in some of the most fire-prone areas of Corte Madera. So not at all adversaries of the town. Very much, the people that we are trying hardest to protect, because we see that you guys have the most on the line. Just like, our on the bay side, our residents whose homes right back onto the water and are already being flooded. So I just wanted to get that point across too. And we know that you guys aren't in this for the views. We know that this is about safety. It's about protecting lives. It's about protecting property. So I just wanted to also say that we know that you guys are coming to us in good faith, and that you're not, this isn't some ploy to protect property values or anything like that. You hear that from time to time from people in the public who will write off concerns about fire hazard or undergrounding as saying it's just about the views. We know it's not. We know that it's a much more serious and grave discussion than that. Wanted to speak a little bit about some of the work that we have done with relation to undergrounding. I know that this is something that we've been discussing with several of you residents. I know Todd has been working on this for a couple of years. I've recently been doing what I can to get involved too after Maureen approached me. So I just want to let you guys know I've been interfacing with PG&E on this issue. Maureen and her group told me about the PG&E undergrounding pilot program that they had caught wind of as long as a couple years ago. I just heard about it from Maureen more recently. So I've reached out to our representative at PG&E. I have not gotten an answer back. I've reached out to him Sunday for the third time in a row now, and said, hey, look, you need to get back to me by Friday or we're going to your manager. So I think we've kind of reached the end of our rope there with regards to PG&E's lack of response. I know that I'm not alone in my frustration with PG&E, their lack of accountability, their lack of responsiveness. So I just wanted to let you guys know that we are pushing on that. And we're kind of getting the same treatment that residents feel like they're getting. So, we're going to keep pushing on this. We'll escalate if we have to. And then I also want to let folks know that due to, I got this idea from your email to us, actually. I reached out to the CPUC. I hadn't thought of this before your email, but I thought, why don't we reach out to them and see if they're aware of any leads on any sort of undergrounding pilot programs or resources or anything like that. So I just sent that email earlier today, hoping we'll hear back from them soon. We'll of course let you know if we get anything promising from them, but I just want to kind of update you on where that effort stands now, just get some transparency in there. Another, I think, important point to discuss is that undergrounding does not equal, is not the whole of fire prevention, nor is fire prevention limited to undergrounding. Undergrounding is definitely a tool in the toolbox, as we've discussed. I don't think anybody here would dispute that undergrounded utility wires are inherently safer than above ground wires. I think that's a known fact, and that's why in a lot of new construction, new communities, they put in the wires underground as soon as the communities are built, because I think that's kind of the the modern standard in a lot of places. So we get that, but I think it's also to discuss undergrounding in the context of all the other stuff that we're working on, like Chief Martin has touched on. That is really important and is part of this addressing fire hazard. That's things like vegetation management. And when I say that right now, I'm not talking about evacuation, because I definitely point taken when you guys bring up the fact that there's a difference between dealing with evacuation, which is dealing with what happens after the fire versus addressing how to prevent fires in the first place. So I think we all hear you on that. Makes perfect sense. But we are doing a lot of work already with regards to vegetation management, removing fuel from both public and private property. That's a big risk, when ignition comes our way. And that's not just limited to within Corte Madera. I'm going to ask Bob in a minute to speak to some of the work that Corte Madera is doing through the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, which is a new joint powers authority, a new countywide agency just created in Marin County specifically to address how we mitigate the risk of a fire starting. So we're going to get to that in a second. And Ruben mentioned our shaded fuel breaks. So that's another strategy that we're employing to really prevent fires from happening in the first place by removing, the fuel that can become a tinderbox if a spark hits it. I wanted to say to Stephen, the idea that you mentioned about having insurers underwrite undergrounding is really intriguing. I had not thought of or heard of that before. That is obviously an issue that's much bigger than Corte Madera. But I'm Corte Madera's representative to the League of California Cities, and we're going to be having over the next year a series of meetings with our lawmakers at the state and federal level. So I will be sure to bring that up, because I think that's a really intriguing idea. And I think, it's always tough to take on a giant entrenched industry like the insurance industry, but I think the way you framed it is perfect, right? It's not about there's kind of no loss for the insurance industry, because if they're underwriting this undergrounding, then they're not going to be shelling out millions upon millions in the future when fires come through and wreck these communities. So I think that's really intriguing idea. Yeah, I would love to hear from Bob a little bit on kind of the collaborative stuff that Corte Madera has been doing through the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. He represents Corte Madera on that JPA. And that work is not really touched on in the climate adaptation plan, because it's happening outside of the town, in these kind of other collaborative fronts. So Bob, if you wouldn't mind speaking to that, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Thank you, Eli. And thank you for that setup and introduction. And I just want to emphasize too what you just said, very compelling from what we've heard from residents of Christmas Tree Hill. Totally understand and relate to some of the problems you're feeling up there, as you'll hear me talk about in a moment. I wanted to touch back on a couple of things Ruben talked about, because Ruben and I also worked together on Central Marin Fire. And one of the things he said was, and this is where the wildfire JPA comes in, and I worked on getting that bill passed for the better part of a year. I was part of that committee. One of the things Ruben said is we have to be very aware of the areas around us. It's not just Corte Madera, it's not just the power lines in front of your house, it's everything around us. And that's what the wildfire JPA does. We have a $20 million annual budget now through property taxes, and that is being spent throughout the county. A portion of it's spent just in county areas, but a lot of it will be spent on vegetation removal. A lot of it will be spent on evacuation routes. And we're still in the setup process. We've only been, active for about 4 months, but we're taking care of that and making that happen. But we're spending $20 million throughout the county. And as Ruben pointed out, about $1 million of that comes back to Corte Madera Larkspur and gets spent in conjunction with Central Marin Fire. I believe one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ruben, that you're going to be focusing on in the next year is every home west of Magnolia and Corte Madera Avenues is going to get inspected in the next year. And they're going to be looking for vegetation removal, home hardening, and, citing, talking to those homeowners about what they can do to reinforce fire prevention in those areas. I think it's also important to point out, Ruben touched on this also, Central Marin Fire has been really active in getting grants, which they've been using for things like vegetation removal. And that has been happening on Christmas Tree Hill specifically. I walk Lower Summit Fire Road every week, and I have watched what has happened on that. And that is a key evacuation route for Christmas Tree Hill. The amount of vegetation that has been removed on that in recent efforts is remarkable. Trees have been limbed up. They've opened up the canopy to make sure that it stays as an escape route. And I happened to be just on it this morning, and just coincidence, and was marveling at it again. The amount of clearance that has been done on there that will help fire prevention on Christmas Tree Hill, as I said, is just remarkable. So that's kind of what's been going on a county level and with Central Marin Fire. I also just wanted to point out, the town has been taking fire prevention on Christmas Tree Hill seriously. We spent about $300,000 last year, I believe, and Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, on vegetation removal and canopy opening and things like that on Christmas Tree Hill. So, we are taking it seriously. We are paying attention. And we hear what you're saying about undergrounding, but I want you to know it's not like we haven't, it's not like the town's been ignoring this. We take this very, very seriously and have been approaching it from a number of different areas. I also just wanted to touch on one other thing about the idea with fire insurers. I sell real estate, and I have been on inspections with insurance companies on homes on Christmas Tree Hill. One of the first things they do is they measure the width of the road. So some of the programs RJ was talking about to widen roads and create better escape routes, I think will actually help long-term with insurance up there. So, I understand some of the other ideas you have, but some of the things the town I think is doing will also help with some of those things as well. So that kind of adds hopefully a little bit of perspective from MWPA. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Appreciate that. Gonna welcome any other council members who would like to make any comments on, on both kind of the issues we've been discussing and the points brought up by members of the public, but also the direction that staff has asked for with regards to the first portion of the climate adaptation plan that we've just received. Who would like to comment? Fred?
Yeah, I actually lived up on Christmas Tree Hill in the 80s and early 90s. It was in a house my grandfather had built up there as a summer home. And back then there was talk about undergrounding wires and the PG&E utilities through the Christmas Tree Hill Dwellers Association. So the talk has been going on for quite a while. I guess the thing I have from staff is, can you do more analysis and what would be the next steps in that to get more information on what it would take to underground wires up there? Because it sounds like cost has been thrown out, I think like 20 to 30 million. I'm not sure where that number came from. So is it possible to do more analysis around that so we can get more of that in the plan?
Yeah, so I'll jump into that. So PG&E provided that. It's a wide range. It's 20 to 30 million, and it's just for Christmas Tree Hill. Again, there's no boundaries. So fire doesn't know boundaries. So just because we spend 30 to 40 million or 20 to 30 million for that hillside, there's a whole bunch of measure of boundaries on the other side of that. And so really it's it's hundreds of millions of dollars if to look at the undergrounding piece to protect Christmas Tree Hill. And so, and so then it goes back to the science. And so Sasha, it's for you and the team I don't think any of us are arguing that we want to have undergrounding. We want to have vegetation management. We want to protect ourselves and have insurance coverage. We want to have all these things. And I'll touch on that in a second. So it seems like, to follow the science, right? That's what we're doing. Is there, I agree. We should be able to put more than a paragraph in there. What are the tools in our toolbox to really speak to this? So that's one thing. I think your staff is just talking from a practical standpoint that if you're going to put tens of millions of dollars into something, you better darn well solve something. And you better look at percentages and science to protect lives. And so we all agree we want it underground, but there's also a whole bunch of things that are facing our town immediately and over the next 20 years. And so that's what we're trying to do in this document. But I think we hear the community, and I think we can certainly, I would think, right, Sasha and RJ and Adam, we should be able to add some language of tools in our toolbox. The other thing on the insurance side, I'll touch on because we have an answer to it. Senator McGuire gave an update to our community recently. There's a video of it, and I think it's linked to our site. People can go to it. But insurance carriers aren't looking at, hey, if we spend $30 million to underground Christmas Tree Hill, we'll solve a problem, we're going to insure them. Well, it's not. They're going to have to do hundreds of millions of dollars to protect Christmas Tree Hill in the whole region. It's cheaper to just cancel insurance. And so the conversation really is a legislative one, and it really stands with our state legislature. It's something similar to what Florida did, and Senator McGuire touched on this, and he did a really good job. It's similar to hurricanes like in Florida. Hey, the legislator passed legislation that if you do certain criteria to harden your homes, you will be insured, you'll be covered. And so there's certain criteria that they put in place. And we're talking about the same thing now for fire. And so as Councilmember Ravazio stated, everything that we're doing in this plan and the efforts we're taking on the fire side and our ordinances and codes in our plan of widening and all the steps we're taking, whether we all agree on it or not, it's actually to protect our residents, to set us up for those insurance requirements. If the legislature, quite frankly, ever steps up and does what they should be doing, we're teed up as a town to be covered. And so those are the steps we're taking. And so I think we're all saying the same thing, but this is an education. And I think ultimately we have to follow science. We have to follow, the timing of how we can best spend our money immediately. And that's what we're trying to do. So undergrounding, ultimately, this is a PG&E responsibility. It is. And that's just, and we need to hold them accountable. And so it's for the town attorney, it's for the council, staff, our community, our plan. What are some of the tools in our toolbox maybe that we can move forward, and let's put it in writing. I think we all agree. There's some great comments by our residents, and I challenge our staff and Sasha and the team to see what we can do, to bring back to council and add that language. So I think we all agree.
And then Todd, if you're more in tune in what other towns and cities are doing in Marin County, have you seen Corte Madera doing far more than what other towns and cities have done as far as, I want to say, mitigation in the sense of, like Bob mentioned, vegetate, cutting back the vegetation, opening up the canopy, and all that, more than what other towns and cities are doing?
So I'll talk in the Bay Area in the state of California. And so there are some other areas in the peninsula, Sasha can speak to it, that are taking the lead and doing a lot. But what I'll tell you is as you look at, do you follow dollars and cents for population of what we're putting into not only of our analysis and our response, there is no one that I know in the state of California that has done what we have done. And I challenge anyone to find it. And I'd be interested to know that. And so one of the things that really, and it goes back to the grand jury report, is we've done analysis of like what the threats are and what can actually happen to all of our communities in the Bay Area. But no one, a lot of people, especially in our area on this side of the bridge, they haven't done the analysis. And that's what we're doing now. We're doing the analysis, and then we're putting dollars and cents to it, not just this year, last year, or next year, for the next decade, the decade after that, and building the plan and putting the dollars and cents and our actions into place. No one in our region has done what we have done. The grand jury was actually critical of us initially until staff followed up with them, that we were just going alone on our processes of what we're doing, saying, look, you need to work regionally and put your energy to the region, because there's no boundaries to these things. And we were saying, hey, we're willing to do whatever we can do, but we're going to do our part. And then the regional approach, it's exactly what Chief Martin's talking about, exactly what Councilmember Ravazio is talking about of his actions on the board. It's all the work that RJ's been doing with the county and our partners of like, look, we're doing everything we can, not only behind closed doors with our cohorts, but we're being as aggressive as we possibly can. And I know our council members have as well, of like, let's be leaders. And so a couple of residents said that, hey, step up and be leaders. That's exactly what we're doing. And I'm passionate about it. My team's passionate about it. And this council is absolutely passionate about it. You've named it the #1 issue moving forward. And so I'm willing to do more, but I feel like we are the leaders, and we're doing everything we can. And Sasha and the team, we're following the science. We're not, there's no egos and there's no opinions here. We're following science and doing everything we possibly can. And we'll continue to do that. And we follow the frustrations. I am very frustrated with PG&E, and I'm not going to accept no. And either as the mayor or the council, we need to do something. But to say that we're going to take $20 million and over, let's just say 10 years, underground Christmas Tree Hill, that is completely irresponsible of protecting this town with the dollars and cents that we have moving forward. We have to step back and really look at this globally of what we're talking about. And that's my point. But to what we're talking about tonight, we absolutely can do more than adding a paragraph. I think we can. That makes sense. Let's put because we're putting the tools in the toolbox for what can we do as a town moving forward, specific to undergrounding. It's a big, important thing. But think about Coffee Park. Coffee Park with 70-mile-an-hour winds, jumped over 6 lanes of highway, went into a neighborhood residential area that's flat, that is undergrounded, and burned the entire neighborhood. That's what we're talking about with climate change. So it's a much bigger picture. So before we just we can give scenarios on all sides of like what we need to do, but I think we need to step back and follow the science, follow this process. Tonight, we are not making a decision for future generations yet. We're doing the work. We're engaging, we're moving forward. There's some really good comments tonight. We're gonna add them. We're gonna come back and continue to talk about this. But if any segment of our community just focuses on one thing, step back and think bigger picture. When you think fire prevention, if you're putting all your dollars and cents and all your action into undergrounding, you're missing the boat. There's so much more that we need to do. We need to do that, but there's another 10 things, and Chief Martin can tell you, and we've been talking about it, that we need to be doing to protect us, to give us a fighting chance in case something happens. I'm passionate about it, and I hope that everybody's hearing us. We got a lot of work to do, and just because I say we're doing more than anyone else and we're being leaders, that's not acceptable. We need to have success, and we need to keep fighting. And so I just want everyone to know that's what we're doing. We're taking this serious. No other leadership team in the history of this town has ever made the efforts of people on this screen right now, and we're committed and we're doing the work. And I'll just one last thing, and I want to emphasize it enough, the County of Marin has done a lot of analysis. We passed the JPA. We've done a lot of work of like what we need to do, even on the floods, on the sea level rise, as well as the fire. What you're seeing here is we're the first organization, entity in the County of Marin to actually do this analysis, put dollars and cents to it, and be committed to it in all levels of our government. And so I think we all need to take a deep breath and take that in for a second and just say, look, it's not time to pat ourselves on the back, but just recognize it when we're talking at each other, because it feels like, and maybe I'm just sensitive to it, it feels like there's a little bit of talking at each other. And I just, we're all in this together, like the mayor said, and council members, we hear you. Let's as a team, let's see if we can put some things in this report, but do not put, when you talk, the undergrounding is a piece of this and it's an important one, but I hope we can put it all in perspective into what we're trying to do.
Okay, no, and I appreciate that, because I do realize that it's only one tool, like others have said, in the toolbox, and I know the vegetation mitigation and all that chipper program, I think it all comes into play. I would like to hear from Sasha and just kind of get some of your input or your feedback just from an outside independent perspective, if you could.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Councilman Berger. I think this is a really valuable discussion. Part of building resilience in a community is bringing community members together and investing, as Todd was saying, in the work that it takes to sort through these issues and decide how to make those priorities. The hillside adaptation actions in the plan are really designed to be holistic, to think both not only about evacuation, which is an important part, but also wildfire mitigation and building all the great work that the fire chief was mentioning. With vegetation management and code regulations and improvements. It's also protection, additional suppression efforts, and then education and getting more people involved. So it really is, trying to think holistically about those tools, about creating a roadmap. And I don't see this plan as any final decision, but it really is, setting that framework and the roadmap that the town can use as you find those opportunities for investment. The one other thing that I'll just add to the conversation is that there may be really strategic opportunities where, as RJ was talking about, you're doing a road improvement and the marginal cost of creating a safer road or a wider road or investing in a pullout or doing these over time can be a really valuable and cost-effective way to invest the town's resources in enhancing resilience.
Okay, thanks. And I just have two questions. I'm sorry, Eli, for Ruben. One is, and I think Bob mentions also, that there's going to be like a house-to-house type inspection. Do you know what the timing on that is? And then that's question one. And the second question, I think you mentioned where eventually it's being looked at to do like a 200-foot clearance on the back of homes that back up to those areas. What would that look like up on Christmas Tree Hill?
Councilmember Cassis, thank you. Yeah, it's so with the home evaluations, they actually began in July of this year. So we inspected, I want to say the number again, it's close to 800 homes or plus, if not more, that were inspected from July all the way through August with follow-up inspections. And each of those inspections included a full house 360 evaluation to try to see, okay, what type of material is your home built of? What type of roofing material do you have? Do you have the correct WUI vents, windows, and so forth? And then they put all that into a GIS database that can later on extract a lot of that information. So in the event that we ever have funding to assist with grants for home hardening, that can be used. So that started in June, and that's going to carry on every year. And our goal is we split up our jurisdiction from the east side and the west side, and then are doing it biannually. So Christmas Tree Hill got done this year. They'll be back in 2022. And once again, what was your second question?
I think you mentioned that eventually there'd be like a 200-foot clearance on some homes.
Yes. Yes. So what we're doing is,
like? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So what it would look like is basically a park-like setting. We're not going to clear cut. What we're doing is removing all your invasive species and dead and down. So any dead material, removal of any dead trees. removal of all your French broom, Scotch broom, dead and dry grasses, to where basically you can walk out in the forested area and basically walk through the canopy or underneath it, and it'd be like a park. And that's what we call that park-like setting, which is that shaded fuel break. And there's some science behind it. When you start looking at ember casts and where embers are landing, it's usually within that first 200 feet or so away from a structure. And that's what's burning homes down. And we're following the science behind that. And that's where that recommendation has come from.
Okay, thanks. And again, I think I agree with everybody else, right? I don't think it's just one piece that's going to solve this. I think it's multiple pieces that we've talked about for the last hour, plus or minus. Thanks, Eli.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Ruben. David?
Yeah, first of all, I want to apologize for any who misinterpreted my reaction by email. Email, unfortunately, doesn't carry emotions with it, and I never intended to be sarcastic. Maureen actually wrote to me twice, perhaps because the first message didn't go through, asking if I had received the message, and so I started with the explanation that yes, I did, even though that was misspelled. But during my 24 years as a homeowner on Christmas Tree Hill, I've spent about 22 of those years in various leadership efforts on the issue of safety in the Hill Dwellers Association, in CERT, actually originally in NERT and then CERT, in 94925, get ready, in the NRG steering committee. And there are a lot of different tools that have been referenced. And the one that I want to make sure that we mention today is the Fire Safe Marin organization and its standards, which are not just about removal of bad fuels, but also planting of good trees that will absorb carbon and out of the atmosphere and provide shade and strengthen hillsides against erosion and so forth. And a big part of that is hardening homes. And my family have spent a couple of $1,000,000 this year hardening the area around our home with bluestone patios and stone and other things, along with new, better plantings, precisely in follow those standards. And to the newer folks who are on this, you who called in, ask Mark Levy, Beth O'Neill, Brandon Hemley, Gene Burns, Colin Woodall, Soren Jensen, who will also call in, and they will tell you, they will reassure you that for 24 years, I've been trying to come to terms with the very knotty, difficult issues that you get into. Where does underground, for just one little example, where does undergrounding stop? You can take the lead lines that come up hill path and put those underground, perhaps without too much difficulty. Does PG&E, are they responsible for putting lines into each home, under a stone wall, past a big tree? You know, so it gets very complicated, very expensive, very quickly. And when I talk to engineers in PG&E, they say two things. One, it's going to be not a couple of $100,000 a year, but I mean a mile, but 5 million to 8 to 20 million a mile. And they also say, we're indifferent. We're proceeding with hardening because it's approved by the CPUC for us to get paid for those investments that we're making in the hardening of distribution lines, of transmission and distribution, but particularly transmission lines, which are the really dangerous ones. And we have none of those here in Corte Madera, and except across the marsh. And they also say they're indifferent because if, to the extent that they're required by the public to make major investments, we're going to end up paying for it in our rates. Same would be true of an insurance related approach. We would end up paying for it in our premiums. Although it's a great idea, and all ideas are welcome. And I wish and I hope that a lot of the energy that's been expressed can come into the tent and be a part of some of the problem solving that we've been avidly working on this for a couple of years now.
Thank you, David. So I think we've had a really good discussion here on the kind of fire related issues. I just wanted to again say I know staff has come to us looking for direction on not just the narrow issue of undergrounding or even the narrow issue of fire mitigation, but kind of that whole half of the climate adaptation plan. So maybe we just do one last round of quick, kind of high level comments on direction for staff. I would say, I think it sounds like there's consensus here that we would love to see an exploration of undergrounding a little bit more fleshed out in our climate adaptation plan. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be able to find a way for Corte Madera itself to do this, but maybe it's looking at strategies like continuing to work with utilities like PG&E, the CPUC, kind of fleshing out what those kind of offensives might look like. I think we could detail in the CAP maybe like a legislative approach, especially through our representation on the league, with regards to kind of lobbying our state lawmakers to try and take the lead on this issue. Maybe it involves looking at a special district. I don't know if that does or doesn't make sense. All in all, though, I think that sounded like kind of the consensus with regards to undergrounding. I think, high level, I think we're moving in a good direction with everything that you showed us in this first portion of the CAP. And I just wanted to say that I think one of the strategies that you mentioned of connecting neighborhoods with very few ingress and egress points to main roads is key, especially connecting. There were 2 connections to Corte Madera Avenue that you mentioned. I think those are probably really high priority connections for us to make. So I think that's probably a key strategy there. Who else would like to comment on just kind of the overall gist of what we've seen? Rebecca? Oh, it's 9:30, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to need to take a vote to extend the meeting here. So would somebody please make a motion to extend our meeting by, is it a half hour or can we extend by an hour? Half hour.
It's one half hour at first, and then at 10 p.m. if you wish to extend it further, you can extend it to 10:30 with a unanimous vote.
Make that motion. Make that
Great,
motion.
thank you, David. Is there a second?
I'll second
Thank you,
it.
Fred. Rebecca, can we have a vote, please?
Councilmember Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes, thank you. So this meeting is now extended to 10 p.m. and we're just going to wrap up comments on the kind of overall adaptation strategies for hillside and central areas before we move to reviewing the shoreline. Any comments, any further comments from council members? Bob?
I thought you said it really well, Eli. I'm with you. Thanks.
Okay, great. Any further comments? And if not, we'll go ahead and ask RJ and Sasha to dive back into our presentation and talk about the shoreline strategies. And I want to thank all of the members of the public who commented on the hillside and central strategies. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for the comments, the extensive comments on the fire issues, that we heard today and over the last 48 hours, and certainly encourage everyone to, participate and be involved. And this won't be the last or the second to last discussion on that issue. Based on what I'm hearing from council, this will be one of several and many discussions moving forward. So I just appreciate all the feedback we're hearing today, and we'll definitely address some of that in our next revision. So moving on, we've got a discussion about sea level rise and shoreline, and I'm going to pass it back to Sasha Peterson to kick that off, as well as San Francisco Estuary Institute's Ellen Payne to talk about some of the challenges there and some of the concepts we've developed.
Great, thank you, RJ, and thanks to all the public for those comments on the hillside. Before we leave the hillside, I just wanted to give special recognition to Fire Chief Martin for all the contributions throughout the course of developing the plan and all the great work that's laid a solid foundation for enhancing resilience in the hillside. To set the stage for the shoreline, sea level rise, and coastal flooding portion of the discussion, I'm going to ask Ellen to lead that, and then I'll come back in after she's done.
Great, thanks so much, Sasha. So before we get into a discussion about potential infrastructure options, it's important to remember the flood risk that Corte Madera shoreline will face if no action is taken. Next slide. As Sasha mentioned earlier, today backyards in Mariner Cove are episodically flooded by king tides, as you can see in the photo in the top left of this slide. King tides are about 1 foot to 1.5 feet higher than normal, and they happen a few times a year. In fact, there were king tides just over the last couple of days. We could see tides like the one in the photo here become a daily high tide by the middle of this century. And with 3 feet of sea level rise and no updates to existing infrastructure, levees protecting Marina Village would be overtopped, and flooding would be widespread in the town of Corte Madera, as you can see in the map on the right side of this slide. It's also important to note that in addition to the sea level rise you're seeing here, we're also expecting to see groundwater levels rise as salty bay water is pushed inland, displacing the fresher groundwater lying above. Rising groundwater can flow under levees, impact buried infrastructure such as pipes, interact with contaminated soils, and perhaps result in surface ponding and reduction in the capacity of stormwater channels. Next slide. If adaptive measures are not implemented, sea level rise will have a significant impact on the town of Corte Madera. A great deal of work has already been undertaken by the county to understand sea level rise vulnerabilities, and even more detailed local information about the potential impacts to Corte Madera is available in the draft plan. Natural areas, roads, homes, and businesses, all essential to the functioning of the town, are vulnerable to flooding as sea levels rise. Next slide. Throughout this whole process, Resilience Advisory Committee members and members of the public have expressed interest in incorporating nature-based adaptation measures as part of the climate adaptation plan. Nature-based measures provide multiple benefits that more traditional flood protection measures like walls and levees may not be able to provide alone. For example, habitat for wildlife, water quality improvement, and recreational benefits, in addition to flood protection. Because they're dynamic rather than rigid structures, they tend to be more adaptable over time, and they can also be implemented in combination with other approaches. Next slide. Not all nature-based approaches can be applied everywhere. They need to be suited to the local environmental conditions. Tidal marsh restoration and enhancement, ecotone slopes, submerged aquatic vegetation, and coarse beaches are the techniques that are most likely to be effective in Corte Madera. More information about these nature-based adaptation measures is available in the draft plan, and they've been incorporated wherever possible into conceptual plans for shoreline resilience. Next slide. The strategies in this plan were developed using sea level rise guidance from the state of California, which is based on the best available science. We know sea levels are rising. We're very clear on the direction that things are going, but it's the rate of change that's still uncertain. The state's guidance provides estimates of projected sea level rise to use for planning purposes based on the level of risk that's acceptable for the project in question. As you can see on the chart here, for projects with medium-high risk aversion, that's the blue line you're seeing, the recommendation is to plan for about 2 feet of sea level rise by 2050 and up to 7 for the end of the century. Next slide. Given that the probabilistic projections, which were used to create those lines on the last chart, can be a little complex to understand, many people have asked the state for one number to use as a planning guideline. In response, the State Ocean Protection Council has set a target to ensure California's coast is resilient to 3.5 feet of sea level rise by 2050, with the expectation that sea levels will rise to at least 3.5 feet by the end of this century. So with that in mind, we've used this recommendation to determine what the required crest heights would be for flood protection structures along Corte Madera's shoreline. So I'll pass it over to RJ now to walk through some of the conceptual designs for these adaptation measures that we've been discussing.
Well, actually, RJ, if you don't mind, I would just jump in and say that once again, there's a suite of actions that would be applied potentially to shoreline neighborhoods and to reduce the shoreline risk from sea level rise and coastal flooding. And it's a mix of policies, educations, programs, as well as infrastructure investments. And I know the planning director, Adam Wolf, is also on the line. So after I give a short overview, if there's anything you want to chime in and add to, feel free to jump in here. But some of the actions that have been prioritized and filtered to the top over the course of the development of the plan are considering the potential of developing a coastal resilience overlay zone. This zone could allow for enhanced zoning requirements to protect those buildings and facilities and infrastructure within a sea level rise risk zone. Also in discussion is broadening and deepening the conversation on the long-term impacts of sea level rise and ensuring that community residents are aware of those risks and are involved in the planning process to prepare for them. Other more specific examples are things like conducting a comprehensive finished floor elevation inventory for buildings so that you could look both at the digital elevation models, such as the ones you've seen before, but also individual structure heights and potential vulnerabilities. And then the coastal resilience overlay zone could be tied to requirements such as adding additional freeboard above the base flood elevation within that zone or throughout the town, or applying different freeboard elevations to different critical facilities to help enhance the resilience of those facilities. And this again is just a snapshot of the breadth of actions that are included in the plan.
Yeah, and if I may, Sasha, just jump in real quick on that.
Absolutely.
This is sort of what Sasha just highlighted here is also highlighted in the plan with the within the plan as a potential option that we consider a range of different policies. Just to note, going back to Ellen's presentation about the 3.5 feet of sea level rise, and I think you were saying that would put it at about 15 foot NAVD as sort of what we should be planning for in terms of the future. Right now, we're at basically the requirement for buildings, residential buildings and structures, is that they basically, if they are rebuilding houses, for example, they must be at the finished floor elevation of 11 feet. That includes 1 foot of freeboard. So we're talking about 4 additional feet over this time period here, as shown in this slide, which obviously has significant amount of implications for the physical form of buildings and structures as we go forward. And so there's a variety of things that we could do, as Sasha mentioned, and I think one way of accomplishing that would be through an overlay zone that sets out requirements for new construction. Similarly, actually, this is an approach we could take as well in just getting back to the fires for a second in the WUI areas. Already there are requirements, but how can we incentivize people to make their properties more resilient? How can we streamline permits and processing and things, reduce costs on that side of things to allow people to actually improve resilience as well? And then there may be areas where, in fact, we just have to, as things play out, again, using the pathway approach, it may be more of a consideration of whether actually we should be encouraging people to continue to invest in certain areas that may, in fact, be more challenging to protect over the long term.
Great. Thank you, Adam, for adding those thoughts. RJ, do you want to talk about some of the infrastructure investment options we're exploring?
Next slide, please. So when we start looking at shoreline, obviously, we're looking at all of our perimeters that are bay fronting. That doesn't just include what's shown here with what's currently our levee berm, the old railroad right of way, and we have portions along our 2 Marina Village, Mariner Cove neighborhoods all the way down to the schools, and then also it wraps around the west side of 101 on Lucky Drive. And so if you participated in our prior engagement opportunities, we've kind of broken those down into several different projects. I'm not going to go into every single one, but we have really covered that boundary that is exposed to the bay. We're going to talk, I think, primarily about the levee or berm that's the current smart right of way or old railroad right of way, and also the Mariner Cove Village. And you can see where without those facilities, we have our town center, many of our other businesses. Not only that, we have Highway 101 that are all vulnerable to rising tides. And that berm is roughly about, on average 9.5 feet. So we have some time, but not as much time as we'd like. And obviously you need to start the planning now and start the, not just planning with the setting up the funding, getting everything's in line. So next slide, please. So as we look at that first project, we kind of came up with 3 kind of initial cross sections, if you will. The top one, this is kind of your conventional levee berm, right? Trapezoidal berm, and that has some pros and cons. There's a significant amount of bay mud because a lot of those facilities are built on top of thick layers of bay mud, and that will settle with time. And so there's a lot of thought that and engineering that'll go into how much we add additional load to that. And as we went through the process, that really pushed us in a different direction. If we add 5 feet to a berm and then it sinks 2 feet over the next 20 years, well, that's probably not the best idea. So that moved us to 2 other options that we think have a lot more benefits. This is this kind of block wall on the exterior, and then we use lightweight fill on the inside. So we're minimizing the amount of load we add, and there's actually opportunities to remove denser material before you do that, and it's possible you come up with a zero net loading option. And then lastly, on the bottom, we have a sheet pile wall, which it's a metal plank, so to speak, embedded in the ground. And so that's very light, very low loading as well. So those are really 2 options that we think have really the most promise. And these are very simplistic in the analysis we've done as part of this overall plan. We've looked at the environmental considerations and adjacent habitat, and looking at things like coarse beaches, ecotone slopes, a lot of those kind of nature-based supplemental pieces that Ellen spoke to. But really, this is kind of the direction we think things are going, and these also have the potential to be raised as part of some second phase 30, 50 years down the road. So we're also thinking for, generations beyond, not just, those of us in Corte Madera enjoying it right now. And so these are some very initial costs. We haven't really done a whole lot of engineering at this as part of this climate adaptation plan. This is kind of more advanced planning, if you will, but we do think these are reasonable costs and have had some, some preliminary engineering that has gone into this discussion. Next slide, please. Secondly, one of the larger projects we see is, mentioned before, these 2 large neighborhood communities that, are very important to Corte Madera, not just because we have many residents there. There's something we'll talk about as we get into the recommendations, but, obviously there is a revenue element with property taxes. And so, there is a balance of we want to do something to maintain those for our community. And then also there's, kind of a return, when we start talking about financing. But we looked at several alignments, and those are all in the draft plan. Obviously, if we do nothing, that's a pretty stark and grim picture there. Obviously, without too long, we're going to have quite a bit of flooding in those neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So we've really looked at developed 2 alignments. We're calling inner and outer alignment. So the inner alignment really kind of hugs those neighborhoods as close as practical. It would involve these facilities either right up against the property lines or possibly on them, depending on as we go forward and look at the downsides of the environment and costs and overall project related issues. The second one is the outer alignment. That's potentially being built on California Department of Fish and Wildlife property on a historic levee. And so that has some merits. One of the downsides there is that it does take San Clemente Creek and make it more of a man-maintained, kind of less natural channel. So we don't fully have the answers with respect to the environmental impacts on that. And so, this is about as far as we can take this project as part of a planning effort. And really to have any strong inclination of one or the other, we really need those other pieces in the equation. And so that's kind of where we're trending as we move out of this cap and into something more substantial. But A lot of great work's been done. You know, we've got these various nature-based solutions, some marsh mounds for upland refugia, for you know, federally endangered bird species, and all sorts of other things. And this project does have potential for grant funding from FEMA and others because of that potential of those flood events, which then FEMA has to come in and fund any damage. Next slide, please. Some of those I didn't, there was, sorry, back up. There was a couple lines here where we're crossing channels, and those would involve some sort of tide gate, which is similar to what we have in a couple places. We have them in Shorebird Marsh, we have it at High Canal. These are not uncommon here in Corte Madera, but they are expensive facilities involving pumps and tide gates that really control the elevation on the interior of those facilities. Next slide. So when we look at cross sections, similar idea. We started with, you know, your more conventional cross section and kind of went from there, and it did again push us kind of in this similar direction where, you know, because of the thickness of bay mud, and, you know, in some places 100+ feet, and the concern of settlement, it really pushed us toward these lighter weight retaining structures. And so, you know, this block wall, this sheet pile, which doesn't show everything else that could be going along with it, with the environmental, you know, supplemental features, or potentially, you know, on the private side, there's potential for, you know, other improvements to make it more beneficial than you know, kind of a larger wall. But it's, and we've developed here these costs that go along with it. So it's a substantial number. You know, I'm sure if anyone's seen this for the first time, this is a pretty big number. And what we want to do, and I'll talk to on my last slide, is move toward better understanding that cost to benefit ratio. This is a required component of just about every FEMA grant. And it really, they want to know, you know, if we invest grant funds in these facilities, what risk does that reduce for FEMA as an agency who has to come in and fund should this damage occur? So it's, again, it's certainly a big number, but it does open up to potential grant funds. And also there's a revenue component when we start talking about, you know, maintaining our community, maintaining those property taxes, or otherwise doing nothing and having to, you know, having to retreat over time. Next slide. So these are some of the really short-term priorities that we see. And again, the cap is a working draft. These are things that, you know, I see us investing on really and working toward in the next 6 to 12 months. So continue our collaboration with all of our neighboring jurisdictions, environmental stakeholders, really refining these strategies so that when we do get that grant fund, we're hitting the ground running. Secondly, I mentioned this cost of benefit ratio. That's pretty much an essential component to any FEMA grant application. It's also great, I think, for overall community understanding, to really understand the pros and cons of these projects. That's something that I'd like to move forward with immediately, with you know, support from council and others. That would then potentially inform the decision of probably the next step on the Marina Village, Mariner Cove, is that initial phase to go through, you know, go from advanced planning to start looking at preliminary engineering and looking at those alignments and really looking at the environmental impacts and really coming up with a real accurate and realistic idea of what that project looks like and costs. We've also, I didn't talk about it tonight, but if you've been following the cap and it's in the draft document, we see some short-term strategies. Lucky Drive gets inundated annually during normal rains. It happened last December, and there was about 18 inches of flood that cars couldn't pass the roadway, and that's, you know, a critical route for Central Marin. And so we see that being eligible for a potential grant coming up, and we have the pieces in place to apply for it, and the consultant available to do that cost benefit analysis and push that grant forward. And hopefully we get funding to solve that problem, which we estimate at about $3 million. Similar to Paradise Drive, we have a Safe Routes project that is built around the corridor there in those schools. That's a grant that we've had in for some years, and we want to add to that to not just build that improvement at the same elevation, but actually, now that we're knowledgeable about all of these vulnerabilities, you know, supplement it to also include sea level rise. And so that's something we could also jump on right away, and could be in you know, design and preliminary engineering on pretty quickly. There's an opportunity in January to do a drone flight and really capture these king tides for public outreach, for, you know, design and planning, for grant applications, to really kind of really stress the issues that we're seeing. And Todd mentioned it earlier, and there's an article not too long ago, but it really put Corte Madera as one of the most vulnerable cities in California and the nation. And so really show what's going on to not just those in the community, but everyone in the Bay Area and beyond. And then one other immediate strategy is, as we're doing geotechnical borings as part of our regular projects, that's an opportunity to invest a little bit more money and have a groundwater monitoring well. And so, you know, if you're going to spend $10,000–$15,000 on a boring for geotechnical services, for a couple $1,000s more, that can be converted to a well that, you know, you can see where groundwater is over time, and that gives you the information you need to make more sound infrastructure decisions later on. So really, this is kind of a, you know, in some ways a 6-month kind of recommendation, maybe a year, but that's kind of where we're looking at as we turn the corner and hopefully complete the cap. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to send it back to Sasha for any closing remarks, and then we'll open it up for any question, answer, or comments.
Great, thank you, RJ. I'll be brief, but I do want to just highlight that the draft adaptation plan is available for public comment. So this doesn't have to be anyone who's listening's only opportunity to provide feedback. The full plan is available at cortemaderaadapts.org, and through the draft plan tab on there, you can download the whole plan or chapters of the plan, and there's an easy to access and provide comments directly on the website. Public comments are currently slated to be open through January 8th of next year. And then, as RJ mentioned at the beginning, the Caltrans Adaptation Planning Grant ends February 28th of next year. We have received some public comments, both through the course of this meeting, but also through the website, ranging from education to the importance of undergrounding utilities, as we discussed, and also protecting important wetlands and ecological function of areas, and navigational rights for homeowners. So it's just a brief snapshot of some of the comments that are coming in on the draft adaptation plan. And I think, just to re-emphasize many of the points that were made over the last couple hours, is that resilience and building resilience at a community scale requires a number of things. It requires robust and redundant systems that can both thrive during normal times, but also survive during extreme weather events. It requires holistic and inclusive planning that thinks about the community and brings the community as a whole together to help prioritize actions and investments. It requires ongoing monitoring and flexibility. The science is changing, the climate is changing, funding opportunities change, community demographics change. So setting in place the ways to monitor the effectiveness of these different actions over time and determine when it makes sense to pivot or when it makes sense to make further investments is critical. And it also requires persistence and dedication that Todd spoke to so eloquently. The town is a leader in the region and across the state in turning the science into action and really informing actions on the ground, but this plan is not the end product and result of this effort to make the community resilient. It's really that next step on the journey of building resilience, and it will take that consistent, dedicated effort over decades in order to pick and choose the actions that are available in the plan, find the right tool to solve certain problems, and implement these actions over time. So hopefully the adaptation plan, as it takes on its final form, provides that roadmap and guidance that the town can continue to use both this year, but over many years to come. So with that, I'll turn it back to Mayor Beckman, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share this ongoing work.
Great, thank you, RJ. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Ellen. The first thing we're going to need to do is take another vote to extend this meeting by another half hour. So if somebody would make a motion to extend to 10:30.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make the motion to extend to 10:30.
Second.
Thank you.
I was muted. Councilmember Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes, thank you. All right, we're going to open this up now for questions from council members for staff and the consultant team. Any questions? Fred?
Yeah, just two quick questions. RJ, is any of the work that the Bridge District is doing out in the marshland, I think for mitigation out there, does that come into play at all?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So yeah, they do have a restoration project, which is actually taking a lot of the fill that's out there, and it's actually berming it up, and it's being done on purpose with help from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And that's gonna be a resource moving forward, a potential source to use that material, which it's already great for that environment. You know, it doesn't have the contaminants or anything. So as we look at constructing berms and levees, that's gonna be a huge resource that is there for us. So thank you.
Okay, and then the second question is, given that there's the potential that Highway 101 could flood, has Caltrans been engaged in any of this?
So yeah, they've been I believe they've been in attendance at least one of the meetings and have been invited to each of them. We constantly interact with them as a grant coordinator. I think in all reality, a big reason we probably got the grant was because as far as I can tell, in Corte Madera, in Marin County on Highway 101, it's probably the lowest lying area of the freeways in Marin. And so I think they recognize that and gave us the funds to kind of start looking at those solutions. But as we move forward, definitely gonna continue that coordination and really push for more involvement from them.
Thanks.
Great, thank you, Fred. Any other questions, David?
RJ, I noticed that you picked up on, let's say, doing more evaluation of the groundwater and putting in a couple of wells. Is this coming from some of the stuff that I'm hearing out of the professor at Berkeley and others who are sort of imagining that the changes to groundwater when sea levels are up will affect more things uphill than just at the shore itself?
I'll let Ellen take that, but definitely, you know, an earthen berm, many of these strategies that we are looking at, they're not completely impermeable. There's going to be some movement of water in. And so can you control it? Can you pump it out faster than it's coming in? You know, all those things come into play, but you want to know your elevations so you can plan around it. Ellen, please jump in.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So I've been working on this issue for a few years now with Professor Hill at Berkeley and Dr. Chris May at Sylvestrum, and we're continuing to extend the work around the Bay as well. But we know that basically where there's a coastal shallow aquifer, there's a connection between that aquifer and the Bay. We will see groundwater levels rise as sea levels rise. It will reach equilibrium over time. That being said, we don't know exactly where we're going to see these issues most dramatically because there are certain preferential pathways that the groundwater will take. And so in areas where there's a lot of bay mud, like RJ described out in Mariner Cove Marina Village, we may see this happen more slowly because the material is less permeable. in areas where you have, more alluvial material with looser deposits, you may see those impacts happen sooner and, more dramatically in the short term. So basically, there's a real data need around the bay to better understand what the connectivity is between our shallow aquifers and the bay to better understand and plan for the future impacts of sea level rise in those areas. But I will say that the one thing that we do need to think about as levees are being built is managing water behind those levees. And so I think that's where the storm drain master plan will come in. A lot more work can be done to plan for not only the shoreline infrastructure, but how that interfaces with our stormwater infrastructure. And that also has to do with rising groundwater as well.
Great, thank you, Ellen. Thank you, David. Any other questions before we turn this over to the public? All right, if not, we're going to open this up for public comment. Any members of the public on the line who would like to comment on the shoreline portion of the adaptation plan, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email public comment at tcmmail.org. We will start with Bob Bundy.
Hi, Eli. Great program here. One of the concerns that I've had in relationship to the wetlands out here and has been addressed by Sasha and Ellen is the loss of wetlands that we experience from north of San Clemente Creek up to Corte Madera Creek. And I'm really pleased that in this program, we're talking about, ecotone slopes, gravel beaches, some way to protect this and prevent the further loss of wetlands from storm surges, ferry wakes, sea level rise. So that's an important part of this whole picture, but that's also something that should come from other sources. A lot of what we need to do, Corte Madera is going to have to look for grants specifically for what we can do. But I would hope that there would be some Measure AA money or some other sources to help with protecting wetlands, which is just valuable to the San Francisco Bay. The other point that I'd like to bring up was I like the outer alignment with a tide gate at the marsh. And RJ and I have talked about the issue of navigational rights that I think a lot of residents would like to maintain, because paddleboarding, kayaking, canoeing, getting out into the bay has become incredibly popular here. And if there was a tidal barrier, as at Shorebird Marsh, we'd have to arrange some kind of portage around that might be difficult for a lot of people. I know Barbara Salzman has also expressed concerns about closing off Corte Madera Marsh and the need to maintain that as a natural waterway. So those are my concerns.
Great, thank you very much, Bob. We don't have any other hands up on Zoom right now. We've got one more. We're going to hear from Alexander.
Hi, everyone. Here again. I'm curious about finding out what companies are providing the estimates and what is the strategy for picking developers in the event that this gets approved. Like some of the numbers that were listed in RJ slides are $5,000 for drone flight, $25 from preparing a flight, a design for cost benefits. Where can we see the list of services or companies that are providing these services?
Great, thank you, Alexander. Go ahead, RJ.
Okay, yeah, so these are just based on past experience doing similar projects. We haven't obtained quotes for many of these. So yeah, the drone flight, actually we have San Francisco Estuary Institute on staff. They have that capability. It's likely a 2-day effort. So that's kind of where you see the $5,000 number. And then yeah, some of the estimates for the overall bigger projects, again, we're in a planning phase. I would avoid the word estimate. We're trying to get some preliminary probable costs. And so we're really taking costs we're seeing at projects like Foster City and others and applying how much they're paying per lineal foot, and then kind of using that compared to our numbers. we're just not at a engineering phase yet, but hence why we've added contingencies and other things to kind of make sure we're in the ballpark.
Great, thank you, RJ. We don't have any other hands up on Zoom right now. Rebecca, did we get any emailed public comments for this portion of the plan?
No, we did not receive any additional emailed comments.
Great, thank you. Then I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to council for any last comments or direction to staff and the consultants on this portion of the plan. Would anybody like to make any comments? David?
Once again, I'm very impressed with the interactions of our own staff with our outside staff and the emphasis on the best knowledge and the best science. And it would seem to me that as this has evolved over the last year and a half, we're getting closer and closer to understanding that which should be spent in near term in order to gain better information for those potentially much bigger investments that are needed over the long term. So that's why I picked on the groundwater and putting in some relatively inexpensive groundwater wells to just get behind and see what is really happening there, so we can. So I would strongly support those additional investigations that will eventually get us to better estimates and better engineering because engineering's on its way. I'm also just curious from RJ or anybody whether we have made any advancements with pulling Larkspur into the conversation, since so much of our shore and the county itself, because so much of our shore is shared and immediately adjacent to, and so we've got to work together or not at all, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a couple coordination meetings with Larkspur in the county revolving around the extension of the berm that's behind Trader Joe's. So that's a potential kind of three-way partnership, obviously with working with SMART and their land rights there. We've also been in touch with county about applying for a grant jointly over on Lucky Drive. And so that's one that it's listed on the sheet there as a potential near-term investment that we'd like to take advantage of. We just heard that they're definitely interested and want to have a larger dialogue. So we're gonna move that forward soon. But yeah, absolutely. Anyone we think is has a piece in our projects or their projects, and we have a piece in it, like we want to collaborate and work together and share costs, share resources, all the above.
Great, thank you, David. Thank you, RJ. Any other questions or comments from council members? If not, I'll just comment real briefly. Two things. One, I think you guys are right on the money. I think the ultimate key though here that I would love to see us really challenge ourselves to on each one of these strategies, to ask ourselves, we're doing these things to protect lives and protect property. But I think two other key things is does it protect, or better yet, create new habitat? And does it create new public amenities? I think, when we're looking at these types of projects, especially things like these levees, I think there's a real opportunity to create both potentially habitat and definitely amenities. One example just off the top of my head would be, we're talking about, a potential levee that goes around Mariner Cove and Marina Village. You've now got the opportunity for a levee top path that's a waterfront place for people to walk their dogs, that now all of these houses have, their back gates can open right up onto this beautiful path overlooking the water. And you've now got a path that connects the trails on Ring Mountain to the trails that exist around the marsh. So I think that's the type of, critical thinking where we're looking at tying these things together in a way that adds value to the community, doesn't just settle for saving houses, but actually adds value. I think that is key. The other thing I would just ask is there any way that we can look at reclaiming some of our marshland that has been eroded over the past decades? We've lost so much of that marsh just in my short life that that I've lived here. It's shrunken considerably from how it was 20 or 30 years ago, and I'm wondering if there's a way that we can kind of push our our front line, if you will, back out into what is currently mudflat but was not long ago marsh. I think it's just if we can swing it, I think it's the right thing to do with regards to both buying ourselves a little more protective buffer and also restoring some of the habitat that continues to be degraded.
So I'm gonna touch on that just a little bit in that I don't disagree that there's a tremendous value to that marsh just from an ecological standpoint, and then it also has benefits with wave run up and other things. I do view that as a regional project, not just a Corte Madera project, so if we're gonna move that forward, we got to get really all of our neighbors involved. But as far as that goes, I'm gonna kick it to Ellen. Her and her agency have spent years or decades looking at that marsh and are the best to speak to it. Thank you.
Sure. And also I'm cognizant of the time, so maybe we continue this discussion offline. The three of us or something. I want to get this meeting wrapped up, but I just wanted to put that out there. So Ellen, if you want to make any comments, go for it. But otherwise, I'm happy to just chat with you more offline.
I'll keep it very brief, and then we can connect later. But in response to that, I mean, we have measured the marsh erosion over time. We know it's eroding. A lot of plans have been put forward, including coarse beaches as a way to slow that erosion. In terms of placing fill to recover marsh that has already been lost, that's far less feasible and unlikely to happen. So I think we're more focused on slowing the erosion that's happening now.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Yes, Sasha?
I just wanted to comment on your first point, and I think it's really important that while it wasn't a goal specifically for the plan, it may have been more of a guiding principle that thinking about adaptation and resilience, not just in the emergency preparedness or sort of, protection frame, but thinking about it as ways to invest in amenities that support the town and the quality of life on a daily basis, and then also function in those extreme situations is really critical. So thank you for bringing that up.
Great, thank you. Any last comments from council members? And RJ and the team, do you guys feel like you have clear direction on both portions of the plan that we've discussed? Great. Okay, then that concludes item 6B and brings us to 6C. Hopefully a brief and straightforward. This is discussion and possible action to temporarily increase hours for part-time Parks and Recreation staff related to continuation of the Parks and Recreation Department's Corte Madera Day Camp program.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. And again, I just want to thank the team and our consultants. That's 18 months worth of work to date, and it's impressive. I'll keep this short. We basically run, and you heard the overview tonight from Ashley and her team. We have a lot of part-time employees, and they're doing a lot of good work. And some of the work that we've been working on, it's outlined in this report, is being done by part-time employees that are going to take us up against the 1,000-hour plus mark. And what that does is if you go over 1,000 hours, benefits and CalPERS benefits are required and they kick in. And so I want to bring this to the council's attention. There's 3 employees that are impacted. 2 will go over that, are projected to go over in early, I believe in February of 21, and then March, another one about March or April of 21. It's a low impact. I'm not asking for a budget amendment, but it does impact on a really minor basis benefits and CalPERS benefits. And so dealing with pensions, I want to bring it and be transparent with the council. On page 2, the fiscal impact. Again, the salaries is within the budget. We're going to cover it with sales tax measure funds that are specifically set up for youth programs. But it has a $3,130 impact this fiscal year on payroll taxes and CalPERS retirement cost, as well as, CalPERS and benefit cost of $3,130, and then payroll taxes of $679. So it's in the budget, but again, by having them go over the 1,000 hours, I am impacting and really setting off minor CalPERS retirement benefits. But I wanted to bring that to your attention and actually ask for an action from council to give me that authority to allow them to go over the 1,000 hours for this fiscal year.
Great.
Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll turn this over to the public. Any members of the public who would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Rebecca, did we get any emailed public comments on this item?
No, there were no emailed comments.
Great, thank you. And we have no hands up from our public on the line, so we're going to close public comment and bring it back to council for discussion and a motion.
If there's no comments, I'll go ahead and make the motion.
I'll second.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hart?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes, thank you. That brings us to item 7, council reports and town manager reports. We'll start with the town manager.
I will save that for the future agenda item report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to council member reports. Fred?
Yeah, I attend the MC Economic Recovery Committee which was last Friday. Given time, I'll end it at that.
Sounds good. Thanks. Charles?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Bob?
I'll hold mine until next time.
Thank you. David?
The Larkspur Corte Madera School District has restarted its fiscal advisory committee, and I attended that. They are challenged, but they are not as stressed as they thought they might be by this time. Enrollment is down, and they're trying to figure out whether that's a short-term or a long-term thing, particularly among the youngest of the students. There are new trustees, and shifting gears, MCE is last Friday approved a new financing tool to prepay its power purchase agreements, which could potentially save them millions of dollars a year. And they have sent a letter to our congressional representatives recommending a national pricing on carbon that would be a direct tool to affect mitigation of climate change. And two of the members who called in from Christmas Tree Hill and I and one other raised the 16-foot diameter star up at 260 Summit Drive last weekend. So it's shining again.
Great. Thank you, David. I attended 4 meetings, nothing of substance to report. So we're going to move on to any comments on the agenda for the next meeting. Fred?
Yeah, just one comment. So since we're looking at the mid-year budget revision at the next meeting, can we also get a status report on the work plan? Because we'll be 6 months into the fiscal year.
Great idea.
Yeah, so are we to the next agenda item?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Casissa, I may recommend that we may want to wait till the first meeting in February. And there's just some reasons for that with what is coming on this next agenda item. So on this next agenda, as part of the work plan, there are 3 things we're going to bring back to you in future agenda items. So the first one is, you heard the public comment tonight. Rebecca did some good research. There have been additional restrictions in the past 6 months that agencies have done in this county, being a little bit more aggressive on the smoking ordinance. And so we will bring something back to you. We're going to try to do that in February. And so, we'll bring something to you there. Thanks, Rebecca and Amy, on that. The next one is the town hall project. Really, we have to find a way of how to open town hall. And we have 3 options in the next 6 months. It's to lease property, move our staff off-site. It's to look at, again, potentially purchasing property, possibly, space and leasing there, as well as bringing in a revenue stream, or it's to move forward with our town hall project. And so I'm going to bring a staff report to you. There's going to be 4 options. There's going to be pros and cons attached. There's going to be multiple financing options of how we would pay for it. And what I'm looking for is a little bit of direction from council of how to move forward. We don't have to make it in a single night, but to get some direction and start to really have a public conversation about this. The next item after we have this discussion, staff is working really hard to basically give you a 10-year projection. We keep throwing out numbers, $50 and $60 million revenue streams over the next 10 years. Well, we're going to try to give you a living document. And the first time you're going to see it is this meeting. And it's going to follow the sales tax revenue, all of our restricted funds, what we as staff per the work plan think we hear from the council and the community of what we are projecting timing wise over the 10 years and how we want to spend it. And now that's a living document. When you start to think about, you'll have a line item and we'll start to put it into the budget. How much money are we setting aside for facilities, sidewalks, streets, flood control, fire mitigation? And we're going to have a living document that we can pull up at any point. We've had 2 opportunities tonight to do it, where when you make big picture, multi-million-dollar decisions, you can actually then go out 10 years and see how that impacts our decision-making moving forward. That'll be a living document. It'll be part of our work plan. But we definitely are prepared to bring that work plan to you. I'm waiting for Daria though, before I do it. You're gonna have a mid-year budget adjustment. There's been a lot of changes. And so we just wanna make sure where we are there. And then in February, that first meeting, Councilmember Casissa and members of the council, it is the perfect timing to give an update of where we're at, if that's okay with all of you.
Yeah, no, that works for me. That's fine.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Any other comments on our agenda items for the next meeting? If not, then we are adjourned. Sorry for the long meeting, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you so much for the feedback.
Job.